Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Melissa was driving down the motorway and realized that something had happened to her car. It was still a long way to town. What to do? The car could stall at any minute. She felt that her car was not behaving as usual. It seemed to be fine, but different than it always was. The girl looked at the navigator. It was still 20 kilometers to town, with forest all around. Please, she pleaded, don't glitch, not now. Let's at least get to town, or better yet, home. And then I'll take you straight to the service tomorrow. I promise. Come on, honey, let's drive a little further. But Melissa's hopes were not to be realized. The car drove about a kilometer and then stopped. The girl barely had time to pull over to the side of the road. Well, fine, she sighed. Forest evening, no one on the road. She picked up her phone. No connection either. Gentlemen maniacs, where are you? Here I am. The perfect victim, Melissa thought. She tried dialing her fiancé's number, but of course the signal didn't go through. So she sent him a text message, hoping it would be delivered, but again, no luck. So Melissa bit her lip thoughtfully. What to do? Sit here and wait for someone to pass by, or go out herself to get help? But which way to go? Where would the connection start to catch? She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't even notice the man approaching her. He knocked on the glass. Melissa flinched at first, then slowly looked up at him. The stranger waved his hand, urging her to roll down the window. The girl looked him over carefully from head to toe. She also looked back to see his car, which he had parked behind her car. But there wasn't much she could see in the thickening dusk. Finally, Melissa decided she had no choice anyway and rolled down her window. Hello, she nodded, stammering. Hello, girl. My name's Brian. Broken? He inquired. Broke down, Melissa confirmed uncertainly. So were you able to call for help, or is it not picking up a signal? He asked. It's not catching, Melissa admitted. I don't know what to do, Melissa said, confused. The man pulled something out of his pocket and held it out to the girl. What is this? She asked. My papers, he replied. I understand that you're afraid. That's why, well, I don't know. Take a picture of my passport. I just don't know how else to prove I'm a decent person. I don't have phone reception here either, so I suggest you come with me to a place where we can call for a tow truck, and then I'll drive you home. Thank you, Melissa nodded. Here, take your passport back. The photo won't help me in any way. I can't send it to anyone right now, but you seem like a good person to me. Besides, I don't really have a choice anyway. She opened the door and took her papers and her purse from the car. Let's go, she said. Brian, don't you know about cars? Maybe there's nothing wrong with it. And I just did something wrong, the girl asked suddenly. Well, try starting her up, the man suggested. Let's have a listen. Maybe we'll realize what's wrong. It won't start at all. I tried it, Melissa replied. Brian spread his hands. What's your name, by the way? He asked. Melissa, the girl introduced herself. You see, Melissa, I'm not very good with cars either. And it's dark already. I can't see anything. So, Yeah, sure, the girl nodded. She locked her car and they walked together towards Brian's car. Do you know how far it is to the nearest station? She asked. There's some sort of workshop at the entrance to town, he replied. But I don't know how good a job they do there. I can take you to the place where I used to get my car fixed. They do a good job there, and the prices are nice, and it's not much further. Okay, Melissa bit her lip nervously. You'll have to forgive me. It's inconvenient that you have to fuss with me. You probably have various things waiting for you. It's okay, Melissa. I can address you that way, can't I? The girl nodded. Let's talk, the man suggested with a smile, so you won't be so nervous. Annets turna for Nikolaipe. He had to go to the sawmill all the time. I buy materials from my work there. I know the road well, Brian said. And I have 2 small bakeries in town. I used to go to the small factory. They make really good jam there, but arranged for deliveries, Melissa replied. How interesting. You're so skinny and yet you work with bread. How's that? Brian smiled. Yeah, it's not quite clear yet, Melissa admitted. We'll have to take another trip. Or maybe, she added, my broken down car is a sign that I don't need to go there anymore. Well, I don't know. And they also say that obstacles only come in the way of something really good, the man informed her. Brian brought Melissa to the service. They have a tow truck too. Let's make a deal. They'll go pick up your car, fix any problems, and then they'll call you. Melissa nodded. Thank you so much for not giving up and giving me a lift. You really helped me out a lot. Melissa, it's like you're saying goodbye to me, the man smiled. And I'm not going to leave just yet. But are you sure you can explain exactly where the car is parked? He asked. No, admitted the girl. I haven't memorized anything. I probably won't be able to tell you anything. Then let's go. Besides, I promised to take you home. That would already be unnecessary, Melissa replied. I've already taken up a lot of your time. Still, let me walk you home. It would make me feel better, Brian insisted. Melissa smiled embarrassedly. She liked the man's concern. No one had worried about her like this in a long time, and here was a stranger caring so much about her comfort and safety. Brian had made the arrangements for the tow truck and car repairs himself. Melissa merely dictated her phone number. Let's go, he suggested cheerfully as they walked out of the service. What's the address? Just don't say no. It's getting late. By the way, Melissa, can you tell me a secret? What's the name of your bakery? But I wonder. I'd stop by, give it a try. Melissa smiled. How about we switch to you? She suddenly suggested. I agree. Brian nodded. Brian drove Melissa home, and she left him her phone number as promised. I guess I'll see you in a few days, he promised. Just call ahead of time, Melissa asked. I need time to bake a cake for you, and it's sure to be delicious. Melissa said goodbye to her assistant and walked into the entryway. The girl went up to the right floor and opened the door with her key. As soon as she stepped inside, Nicholas immediately looked out of the room. God, finally, Melissa. I've almost lost my mind. It's almost 1:00 in the morning. Where have you been? You're not answering your phone. I thought for sure I'd call the police in a couple more hours. Nicholas, calm down, please, she pressed against the man. Melissa, honey, what's wrong? Where have you been? I went to the settlement, remember, she clarified, to find out about the jam. How could I forget that? He nodded. And my car stalled right on the road in the woods. No phone reception. The man looked at the girl in horror. My girl, how on earth did you manage? You must have been so frightened. Very much so, she nodded. Thank goodness a car stopped. A man gave me a lift to the service. I was so scared to get in his car, but there was no way out. Anyway, my car will be taken away and repaired. They'll call in a few days to pick it up, Melissa finished briefly, and I'm home. Well, that's good. Nicholas could see that he had already calmed down. You're so smart. Totally made it through. Tired, I guess, Nicholas said. Tired, confirmed the girl, and hungry. And I'm hungry, agreed the man. I was so worried while you were away that I couldn't eat a bite. Let's go cook something. How was your day? Melissa felt like if they didn't talk now, she'd fall asleep just walking. But pretty good overall. The flour came in, the butter. I took everything in, checked everything out. Chloe rang tonight. She's going on sick leave. She's got a cold. But I found a replacement for her the day after tomorrow. Thanks, Melissa nodded. What was started? What would I do without you, my helper? Oh yes, Nicholas perked up. Also, the wedding planner called. Says we need to discuss flowers. But here, I'm sorry, Melissa, I didn't get involved. Flowers aren't my area of expertise at all. I said you'd call her back tomorrow yourself. Melissa nodded. Yes, thank you very much. And a couple of hours later, she fell asleep. Melissa suddenly thought of Brian and smiled involuntarily. The man had an unusually attractive smile. His brown eyes seemed to envelop you with their warmth. Melissa loved Nicholas. They had been together for a long time. He has helped her so much with the business. He knows thoroughly how their bakery works. They make a great couple, and a wedding is the natural outcome of their relationship. But why is there such a sweet tingle in my chest at the thought of Brian? Finally, writing it off to the fatigue and excitement of the day, Melissa fell asleep. In the morning, Melissa drove to work as usual. Nicholas had some business to take care of today, so Melissa had to make her own way to the shop floor. She thought about her car and involuntarily thought about Brian. The man hadn't called yet. Melissa had his phone number, too. She had a terrible urge to dial his number. The shop was already in full swing. As always, the smell of freshly baked bread was delicious. As soon as Melissa appeared, Jennifer, the girl who had been the head pastry chef for several years, rushed over to her. Melissa, I made it up yesterday, she informed her. Melissa knew that Jennifer was an enthusiastic girl. She always had more than one project in the pipeline, so it was necessary to be specific. What did you come up with? Yes, I came up with a recipe for your wedding cake. I want to do something totally unique, and I came up with the whole thing yesterday. Come on, I'll show you around. Jennifer excitedly talked about the filling, but Melissa listened half-heartedly. Melissa, what's going on? She asked. It's like you don't care. I'm telling you about your wedding cake. Melissa nodded. I'm listening, she replied. I'm sorry. It's just that something happened yesterday, and I'm having a hard time coming to my senses. What happened? Jennifer asked immediately. Melissa told her about her adventures last night. Melissa, but it's not pleasant, of course, all of it. But you have a wedding in a week. You've got to pull yourself together somehow. Get your mind right already. It's all just petty problems you don't understand. This man, Brian, who helped me, I think about him all the time. I know you can't, but I do. It's just that things with Nicholas and I have been kind of off lately. I think things are great with you too. You're such a beautiful couple. He loves you and you love him. But don't you think it's just wedding excitement? You're imagining things? No, it doesn't seem that way to me, she objected. Nicholas and I have always had a calm relationship. You know, the passion, the falling in love, never happened. You've joked yourself that he and I are like an old married couple. Everything was measured and calm. And you were okay with that, weren't you? Jennifer reminded him. Sure, he's been working for me for almost 3 years now. We've been together that long, and he's not just my deputy. He's put his heart and soul into these bakeries. Melissa sighed. Especially since it doesn't work out with the kids either, and he puts up with it. Never a word of reproach. I thought that's the way it was supposed to be. That Nicholas was the best option for me. But lately we've lost that. He's still always there for me. Seems to always be there to comfort and support. But at the same time, it's like he's gone. He's distanced himself from me. And yesterday with this Brian guy, I never felt like that, you know. He's like I don't know, like my soulmate, like a person I have to have around. It's like an obsession. You know, I think as far as Nicholas is concerned, you're just tired of preparing for the wedding. And especially since you've never argued as much as you have over her. You want a modest wedding. He wants a lavish one. It's clear that you're constantly clashing over little things. And it seems like you don't understand each other that well anymore. Jennifer smiled. Also, You should see this Brian guy again. Because you were tired and scared yesterday, and he helped you through a difficult situation. So you thought he was a prince on a white horse. And when you see him in a normal setting, all his charm disappears. You'll realize he's a perfectly ordinary man. Melissa nodded. I guess you're right. I was a little nervous last night. So what's up with the cake? That evening she called a taxi again because Nicholas was still busy. She suddenly caught herself thinking that she had no idea what her fiancé had been doing all day today. She paid the cabbie and got out of the car. To Melissa, she heard someone call out to her. The girl looked up and saw Brian walking towards her. Good evening. Evening. What are you doing here? She wondered. We switched to you yesterday, Brian reminded her. Here, take these. He handed her car keys. The car's over there. She's fine. All the faults are fixed. I put more petrol in it, by the way. Melissa was taken aback. Brian, but it wasn't worth it. How much do I owe you for all this? Why did the service call you and not me? Yeah, I'm so embarrassed, Melissa said. I arranged for them to call me myself because I really wanted to see you again. And you don't owe me anything, he smiled, except for a cup of coffee. Why don't we go out? Sit for a while, just talk. I really enjoyed spending time with you yesterday. Melissa sighed. So much for realized he's a regular man. There seems to be absolutely nothing ordinary about Brian. Okay, she accepted the invitation to her own surprise. So what are you so lost in the morning? Jennifer asked. Did you have a fight with Nicholas? No, Nicholas wasn't home last night. I was asleep when he got home. Do you even know where he was? Jennifer asked. Or are you not interested in where your man spends his evenings? Yes, he went to a factory in the neighboring region, negotiating deliveries. It's a long journey, so he arrived late. What bad timing, Melissa spluttered. So what else happened? Brian brought my car to me yesterday. Can you believe he paid for everything? Went to the service and waited for me outside my house with my car. Didn't charge me any money either. Maybe he's a maniac and he's stalking you. Jennifer, what are you talking about? Melissa shook her head dejectedly. He's a good, honest man and so caring. So, girlfriend, he brought you the car. What happened next? Did you thank him, take the keys and go home? Not exactly. He took me to a cafe and we sat there for about 4 hours. And kept talking. Jennifer, I've never had such a good time with anyone. My whole life just turned upside down. I thought I was going to live my whole life with Nicholas and never know what real feelings were. And now you see how it is. What are you trying to cancel the wedding? Melissa sighed and covered her face with her hands. I don't know. I don't understand. It's just that I'm in love, you know. And he has feelings for me too. Melissa sighed. He says he never believed in love at first sight. That he thought it was silly for schoolgirls, but he saw me. Melissa, Jennifer sighed. You don't know him at all. Look, Jennifer looked at her friend. On the other hand, you have a right to be happy. And more importantly, Nicholas has that right too. If you don't love him anymore, maybe it's more honest to say so. After all, that would make 3 people unhappy at once. Say, Jennifer. Melissa jumped up and started pacing from corner to corner. Tell him what? That he spent so many years with me, raised my business with no expense spared. And now that I'm doing okay? No, it's not even okay. My business is doing just fine. I'm gonna quit. Do you know what that's called? That's betrayal. No. You can't cancel the wedding. Melissa froze. I need to block this Brian's number and forget about him and just get ready for the wedding. Jennifer, just you, please don't say anything to Nicholas, I beg you. I won't. Jennifer sighed. Of course I won't say anything. Melissa was determined. She had indeed blocked Brian's phone number. True, every night before she went to bed, she unblocked his number and looked at the messages on all the social media sites, hoping that he had called or texted her. But she hadn't heard from Brian, which is not surprising, really. I mean, she had told him she was getting married. Melissa realized that it seemed for the best, that it was the right thing to do. But despite that, she was angry with Brian and very nervous. Because of that, she was taking it out on Nicholas over nothing. They had already had several fights. The wedding was only 2 days away when Nicholas couldn't take it anymore. "Nicholas, what are you talking about?" Melissa said indignantly. "Well, it doesn't. Can't you see?" The man wondered. "We fight all the time over every little thing. And it's not just about the baker. It seems to me that absolutely everything annoys you." Melissa sank into a chair and covered her face with her hands, hiding from the world. She needed a moment to herself. Melissa flashed the urge to tell him everything, to confess, but she quickly brushed it away. To know that confession would only ruin everything. She'd been going to this life, this stability, for too long. She had feelings for Brian, but she didn't know him. It might not work out. And Nicholas is always with her, loving and supportive. Leaving Nicholas is not an option. "Nicholas, you forgive me." She looked the man straight in the eyes. "It's just that the wedding is just around the corner. I'm very nervous, so I'm taking it out on you over nothing." The girl waved her hands. The man smiled and knelt down in front of her. "My good girl, I understand," he replied, "just tired too. You know, so anxious for it to be the day after tomorrow and for it to be over already." "Me too," Melissa nodded. "Me too." On the day of the wedding, Melissa was shaking. The girl was thinking about having to cancel the wedding again. She sat in front of the mirror, watching her hair being done, wondering why she was doing all this. Why hadn't she stopped everything 3 days ago? But then she remembered Nicholas, their conversation. She couldn't betray him, leave him. He was always with her, and she would be with him. Melissa took a deep breath, ordering herself to calm down. A few hours later, they were married. It was safe to exhale. The deed was done. Doubts no longer plagued her. Melissa tried to relax and take some pleasure in her own wedding. There weren't many guests, just the closest ones. They had gathered at the country estate. "Oh, Melissa," her husband hugged her. "I've invited another man to join us. I think we'll feed. So we met the day before yesterday out of the blue, and I." Melissa looked at Nicholas in surprise. "Met the day before yesterday, and you immediately invited him to the wedding." "He's a childhood friend of mine, a close friend. But we haven't seen each other in probably 15 years. And the day before yesterday, when we met, we didn't even have time to talk. So I thought, do you mind?" "No, I was just surprised. You're not prone to such spontaneous behavior." "Well, that makes sense now. Of course, let him come. I think we can safely feed one more person." Jennifer walked over to Melissa. "Shall we talk?" her friend asked in a whisper. "Let's not," Melissa asked. "It's already over. We got married. Now we're going to live, hopefully happily ever after." "And Brian?" "Brian I'll forget," she replied. Melissa," her husband called out to her. Melissa turned around and was literally nose to nose with Brian. "I'd like you to meet him," her husband broadcast cheerfully. "This is my friend, my classmate. It's been so long since we've seen each other." Melissa felt dizzy and dark in her eyes. "Hello," she mumbled. "Melissa, are you okay?" Nicholas became worried. "You're all pale." "You don't worry." Jennifer came to her rescue. "Melissa just told me she's a little dizzy. It's not like she's eaten anything today. We're going to go to the Kobold to get something to eat, and then we'll talk to you some more." Yes, yes, of course, Nicholas replied. Melissa, maybe I should come with you. No thanks. Melissa had already recovered a little. Is that him? Jennifer asked. Barely had they moved far enough away from the men. Yes, Melissa confirmed. How can that be? They've known each other since they were kids. Can you imagine? What if Brian tells about us knowing each other? Look, but he's not stupid, Jennifer replied. Jennifer continued. You told me 10 minutes ago that it was over. You made your decision, you got married. You're with Nicholas now, so get a grip. You're the bride today. You're the center of attention. Yes, Melissa replied. You're right. She looked at the guests who stood scattered around the table. We should do something, right? Let's go dancing, Melissa said firmly. The girl briskly approached her husband and Brian. Nicholas, I'm sorry I felt bad all of a sudden somehow, but I feel much better now. So I'm Melissa, and it's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm Brian, and it's a pleasure to meet you too. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to steal my husband. Nicholas, let's dance. I'll be fine, Melissa promised, smiling wickedly. Brian, and I have a favor to ask of you. Please invite someone to dance too, or our guests are getting bored. It will do, Brian replied. The bride's wishes law. Melissa and Nicholas left to dance. The girl smiled at her new husband and tried to convince herself that everything was going great. She truly loved him. All in all, the wedding went well. At one point, Brian just disappeared. That's when Melissa felt like she could finally relax. And from there, she had a lot of fun. She and Nicholas didn't get home until late at night. Are you tired? I don't want to get this dress off. But all in all, it's great. It was an awesome wedding, wasn't it? The girl smiled. Awesome. Nicholas agreed. A suggestion, let's move our wedding night to tomorrow. Agreed, Melissa replied, very sleepy. The first few weeks of Melissa's married life passed. At first, it seemed to her that nothing had changed. Then she noticed that Nicholas had become even more caring and attentive than usual. Melissa, I think you'd better not go to work today, he said first thing in the morning. Maybe you should go to the beauty parlor or get a massage. Nicholas asked. Do I look that bad? Melissa wondered. Are you suggesting that I not drive to work today? Yesterday you said you needed to go on holiday. The day before yesterday there was something about a sanatorium. What's going on? Melissa, you look great, Nicholas mused. I didn't want to speak directly, but let's try having a baby again. You know what I've been thinking? You've always worked really hard. There were problems with the business, but we're doing well now. Maybe you should take some time off, get some new emotions, relax. Then we can make this work. Melissa, I suggest you work a little less temporarily, at least for a few months. Melissa bit her lip. Maybe we could try seeking medical help, she suggested. Well, I get it, Nicholas nodded. If it's okay with you, I'd give it a try. Melissa, I love you, and you're enough for me. But I think you should try every possibility before giving up. I agree, the girl nodded. Then we should go to the doctor. Nicholas nodded in agreement. Let's read about the different clinics. We need to pick a good one. Literally a couple of days later, they were already sitting at the doctor's appointment. Well, before we discuss anything, we need to take all the tests. You say you recently got married. Preparing for a wedding is usually a lot of stress. Perhaps the whole process is best put off for a few months. In any case, let's see the results of the tests first, and then we'll discuss further plans. Agreed, Melissa nodded. It had been almost 3 days since she'd had the tests. You're not angry? Nicholas asked at the end of the 3rd day. That I got you involved in all this? No, I want to figure it out too. You're right, we should give it a try. I have another surprise for you, look. Nicholas pulled a large envelope out of his pocket. "What's this?" The girl wondered. "Vacations to a sanatorium for 10 days. "Wait," he interrupted Melissa, who tried to object to something. "Hear me out. I'm not going. I talked to Jennifer." Nicholas continued. "She's willing to keep you company. I'll keep an eye on things here. The business will be under control. We won't have anything to worry about. I first thought of buying a trip to Egypt or some other exotic country. But then I realized that a long flight and a drastic change of climate wouldn't be good for you right now." "The doctor's appointment isn't for another fortnight," Melissa reminded him. "Agree to it," Nicholas insisted. "Okay," the girl agreed. "Maybe really, I should get some rest. Thank you for taking such good care of me." Melissa and Jennifer went on holiday. "Your husband couldn't have thought of a more boring holiday for us," Jennifer resented. "Why do you say that?" "Let's go to the mountains. I'm sure there's plenty of fun to be had there too." Jennifer sighed. "Well, there's nothing to do. I'll have to figure out how to entertain myself." "What makes him think you need a holiday anyway?" "We've been to this clinic. We've decided to try IVF. I've done the tests. And the next appointment isn't for another fortnight. So I wouldn't be nervous and I wouldn't have to wait unnecessarily." "Wow, that's a big decision. For some reason I thought you had already closed that topic." Jennifer frowned. "I was under the impression that Nicholas didn't want any more children, but in the sense that he's calmed down, accepted the fact that you can't get pregnant." "I thought you were happy for us," Melissa wondered. "I am happy. It's just unexpected. You've only been married 2 weeks and the subject came up right away. And I think it's legitimate. We're an official family now." "Maybe you're right," Jennifer replied. On the third day of their holiday, Melissa received a phone call from Nicholas. "Honey, we have an emergency," he informed her. "How could we not have thought this through?" "What happened?" "Nicholas, don't scare me," Melissa exclaimed. "They came to the bakery to check the counters. You know it's important. The inspection is coming up, and I don't have power of attorney. I need the owner of the premises." "Did you talk to him?" "What do we do now, Nicholas?" "I'll buy a ticket for the next plane." "No, wait, Melissa. I didn't mean to call you." Nicholas cursed. "Damn, I didn't mean to worry you. It's just that the test will probably be as early as Wednesday. We won't have time to go back and get everything done. Why don't you go to the notary, get a power of attorney for me? If you get it done today, they'll have the meters changed by tomorrow." "Okay," she finally said. "I'll figure it out now. There's probably a notary here." So the girl said goodbye to her husband. "Is there a Hankströprod?" "Want to work again?" Jennifer frowned unhappily. "Are you resting at all?" "Maybe I should go bake something in the meantime." She grinned. "And where are you going to bake?" Melissa laughed. "I'll go to the mess hall and cry. Maybe they'll let me in," replied her friend. "Okay. What did your husband come up with?" "Oh, it's nothing. Listen, Jennifer, you get some rest. Go get your treatments. I'll be fine on my own." "Are you sure?" a friend asked. "I can come with you." "No," Melissa refused. "I'll just go to the notary. There's a document that needs to be drawn up." Melissa found the notary just a few streets away from the sanatorium. You'd think Nicholas had chosen this place on purpose. There was no queue, and Melissa was quickly invited into the office. The girl explained the situation. "Excuse me, is it possible to draw up a power of attorney somehow, so that he can do these counters, I don't know, take the goods, but that the really important matters are left to me to decide?" "You don't trust your husband?" The notary looked at the girl with interest. "It's not that I don't trust him," Melissa replied. "It's just that I don't think decisions like this are made spontaneously. I'd like to think it over again. I'd rather do that when I get home. Wise, the notary agreed. Okay, see what we can include in your power of attorney. A couple of hours later, Melissa was already at the express delivery service. She paid the fastest rate and sent her husband a copy of the power of attorney before doing so. Nicholas, I already sent the original, but even the fastest delivery service won't have it until the day after tomorrow. I get it, honey, but that's okay. The important thing is that the power of attorney is already in place. I'll decide the rest. Get some rest. I'm sorry I ruined your whole day. Nicholas called the girl again late at night. Melissa was about to go to bed. Tell me, are you kidding me? Nicholas asked. What's wrong? It's just that I realized today that my spouse doesn't trust me at all. You know, Melissa, it even hurts. You spent so much money for the sake of giving me the right to have the meters enter. Melissa, I just want to understand you. What am I to you, a free servant? Nicholas, stop saying that, please, Melissa interrupted him. Look, decisions like this aren't made spontaneously like this. Let me come back, and we'll have a proper discussion about what to write in this power of attorney. For now, it's just the way it is. I'm just offended that you didn't even want to talk to me. You just went straight for me. What kind of relationship do we have? The girl asked. It's just that I wanted my wife to trust me more. Especially since I'm proven to her year after year that I'm a great employee and more concerned about the well-being of her firm than anyone else. Melissa, I put my heart and soul into your bakery. I've worked hard and spared no effort or time. I know, Nicholas, and I really appreciate it. I really do. And I should have made a power of attorney for you a long time ago. It's just that I want us to talk things over together. Maybe even divide up our responsibilities a little differently. I'm sorry, Nicholas asked. Something about reading that piece of paper made me feel so hurt. It seemed like you didn't appreciate what I was doing at all. I do, Nicholas. I appreciate it all very much. Okay, her husband sighed. You forgive me again. And it's time for you to rest now. Good night. For the rest of the week, Melissa and her husband never called again. They talked every day, of course, but they both preferred to do it by correspondence. The girl had never had such a serious argument with Nicholas before, and she had no idea what awaited her when she returned home. On the last day of their holiday, Melissa and Jennifer decided to go out into the city and have dinner in some restaurant. They found a place with a nice view beforehand and made a reservation. Feel like going home? Jennifer asked. Very much. I miss work, don't you? Jennifer nodded and laughed. Melissa's phone rang. Nicholas, Jennifer asked. Whereupon Melissa glanced at the screen and saw a completely different name there. Yes, she answered, Jen. He and I haven't spoken in so many days. You don't take offense, I'm going to step away for a bit. Brian, hello. I didn't expect you to call me. Hello, Melissa. I think we've moved on to you. Good, the girl nodded. I didn't expect you to call me. Actually, I've been thinking about whether or not to call for a while now. And then I ran into Nicholas today and decided I should call. You're coming back from holiday tomorrow. You even know I've been on holiday, the girl marveled. Nicholas did say. So tomorrow, what time can I meet you and drive you home? We need to talk. It's really important. It took me a long time to decide to have this conversation. I didn't know if I even had the right, if I should get involved. Anyway, please, let's talk and as soon as possible. If it's for tomorrow, I'll be back in the morning. My husband will be at work. I'll drop my stuff off at home and write. Okay? Melissa offered. I'll be waiting, Brian replied. Thanks for saying yes. Melissa turned back to her friend. Did you make up? Jennifer asked. We didn't really seem to be fighting, replied Melissa. We just didn't understand each other. So is he coming to meet us tomorrow? No, he can't. She shook her head negatively. He has an important work meeting. So the next day, Melissa and Jennifer returned home from the airport. They had driven themselves. Nicholas really didn't meet them. Melissa was disappointed. She thought her husband would still cancel and come to pick her up. After all, they hadn't seen each other for 10 days. She went up to their flat, left her suitcase in the hallway, and went into the kitchen. Everywhere was in order. The girl opened the fridge. Inside, she found a pot of soup and a pan of cutlets. So Melissa smiled in surprise. What a caring and thoughtful husband she had. No, she had known before that Nicholas was a good cook, but he hadn't been particularly fond of it before. Melissa pulled out her phone and dialed Nicholas's number. She had already called him from the airport. He knew she was in town and asked her to call again when she got home. But this time no one answered the phone. Apparently, Nicholas' negotiations weren't over yet. Melissa decided that she should take advantage of her free time and call Brian. After all, she had promised. The girl really hoped that the man was not going to confess his feelings to her, because already in their relationship, everything was extremely complicated. They agreed to meet in the nearest park in half an hour. Melissa only had time to change her clothes and ran straight to the meeting. "You just flew in recently, didn't you?" Brian remarked. "I thought we were meeting later. You must be really tired. And if you want to, how about a coffee shop?" "No, thanks." "Brian, why don't you tell me what you were going to tell me? Please. I don't have that much time. And to be honest, there's still a lot to do." The man sighed heavily. "I want to apologize straight away," he pronounced, "for going to hurt you. I really weighed the pros and cons 100 times, but I figured you should still know." "What is it? You're scaring me." "Nicholas has a second family." "What?" Melissa stared at the man in shock. "A family? You must be confused about something. There's just no such thing." "Let me tell you," Brian said, squeezing her hands. "Listen to me." "Okay," Melissa replied, stammering. "Just don't touch me. Tell me." "I live on Maple Street in Building 37. I recently moved there, bought a new flat, and just 2 days before your wedding, I ran into Nicholas there. He was loading stuff into his car, dishes, books. I noticed him because I had just been in a similar situation myself, and then I saw that he was my mate. I came over and we got to talking. There was a girl and a boy of about 5 with Nicholas. I naturally assumed it was his family, but he dismissed it and said he was just helping them. See, he was just helping out. Melissa seized on his last words. I would have thought so too, but as I was leaving, I heard the boy call Nicholas Daddy. Melissa was silent for a long time. I don't know what to tell you to that. Maybe you heard it. Maybe the boy was calling someone else, and not Nicholas. And why didn't you say anything to me before the wedding or at the wedding? Melissa, well, imagine it. I see my old mate with his family. No surprise to me at all about the situation. He invited me to the wedding, of course. Well, there could be a lot of possibilities here. Melissa nodded her head in agreement. Well, yes, that's understandable, she replied. And when I saw you, I was pretty confused. It's not like I didn't know you were going to be Nicholas' fiancée. And then, there was always the option that that girl was his ex-wife, and you know. Anyway, I tried to find out from Nicholas that day at the wedding, but he just brushed me off and then avoided me. If I had seen some other girl at the wedding instead of you, I probably would have just put the whole thing out of my mind. Brian smiled warmly at the girl. I really liked you. Well, that's no secret to you, of course. Melissa only sighed sadly. Thank you, of course, she replied. But I know it's not my feelings you're worried about right now. Brian nodded. Anyway, after your wedding, I decided to figure things out on my own. It didn't turn out to be difficult. This girl, her name is Chris, by the way, remembered me. She saw me talking to Nicholas that day. Anyway, at first we just said hello. I remembered what time she picked up her son from daycare, and I tried to run into her more often. Then I was somehow surprised that she was the only one picking up the child, and that I didn't see Nicholas at all. Anyway, one evening I got lucky. Chris was coming home with some large bags. I offered to help. She said yes. We got to talking. "And what did she tell you?" Melissa asked. "She knows about me. But for one thing, she confirmed that she and Nicholas are family. So yeah, she probably knows about you. She said that Nicholas has a difficult project, both personal and work, and that it's hard for her alone, that it's hard to wait. But she supports him completely and believes everything will be okay." Melissa lowered her head dejectedly. "Okay," she nodded. "Finally having a baby with him I can understand. I couldn't give birth. But how old is the boy? You said he's already in daycare?" "Yes, he's 5. I asked Chris, have they really been living all these years without Nicholas' help? She said it was complicated, and that he never left, was there for them all the time. God been there for me the whole time. God, I can't believe he's been deceiving me for so many years. Tell me, how could I have been so inconsiderate? How did I manage not to notice anything?" "I don't know, Melissa. There are 2 possibilities here. Either you loved him too much and didn't pay attention to his flaws, or..." Brian hesitated. "I didn't love him at all and didn't care about him or his life," Melissa finished for him. Melissa was silent for a long time. "Isn't there a third option?" she finally asked. I don't know, Brian shrugged. "How did you 2 meet in the first place?" "I was just starting my business at the time." Melissa began to recount. "I opened my first little bakery. It was very difficult for me. Once my bakery started generating revenue, I hired my first employee right away. It was difficult to find a person because I was looking for a loader, a storekeeper, and many others. And Nicholas agreed right away and proved himself to be a great employee. I could rely on him for everything. And over the years we got used to being together all the time. I thought he was the only person I could trust completely. And I didn't care about him. I just thought things had been clear between us for a long time." "But you don't love Nicholas?" Brian asked. "I got used to him." Melissa nodded. "I was even embarrassed sometimes because he always said he loved me very much." "It sounds like Nicholas managed you well," Brian remarked. "Except why?" "He and I used to talk a few years ago about making him an equal partner in the business, that he'd buy out my share. But I don't know why I kept putting it off. It's probably my own fault. I created this situation. He's been with me for so many years helping me," Melissa sighed. "I want to remind you that he's had a second family for a long time too. So he's been cheating on you for years," Brian said. Melissa shuddered. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked. "I don't know," Brian replied, "but I'm willing to help you. I wish I understood. Help with what?" "I'm so clueless about what I should do," Melissa sighed. "While I was on holiday, Nicholas asked me to make a power of attorney." "And did you make one?" "Yes," Melissa nodded, "but not the kind he wanted. I only gave him authority to do certain things, seal meters, take delivery of goods. Anyway, there's nothing serious in the power of attorney." "And how did he react?" "We had a fight. He accused me of mistrust. It turns out he was right. I didn't trust him. I don't know why. But it turns out you were right not to trust him in the end," Brian remarked. "I'm sorry, but I think you need a divorce. You don't have anything in common yet. Am I right?" Brian said. "Yes," replied Melissa. "The business is mine, and we live in his flat." "Do you have a place to live?" "No," Melissa replied, "not right now, but I'll get myself something. We have to move out. I realize you can't do that." The girl wrapped her arms around her shoulders. "I'm so scared," she admitted. "You have no idea how much doubt I had before the wedding. I almost canceled it twice." "So you felt something?" Suspected? I didn't feel anything. I was in love with you. That's why I wanted to. Melissa waved her hand hopelessly. What did you say? He asked. You fell in love with me. I'm sorry, Brian. That's not what I meant. Let's talk about this later. Okay, but let me help you out. Remember I told you I recently moved into a bigger flat? I remember, Melissa replied. Anyway, my old flat didn't go anywhere. I didn't sell it. No one lives there now. Move in there for now. I'll help you move your stuff. I think you should move in first and then talk to your husband. It's not really fair, but it's safer. Nicholas has done a great deal to take over your business. I don't think he'll just let you go. Melissa glanced at her watch. You're right, and I need to run home right away. I'll pretend everything's fine tonight, and then tomorrow, when he leaves for work, I'll pack as much as I can in time. Can you come over? Yeah, anytime. Just give me a call, Melissa. Don't worry too much. It'll all work out. Brian, I'm sorry I took it out on you like that. It'll be fine. I was the one who offered to help. Melissa returned home. Her husband arrived literally 15 minutes later. Luckily, the girl had time to change into her home clothes and get comfortable on the couch. You have prepared so much, she exclaimed, coming out to her husband. However, now she wasn't sure if it was her husband who had cooked. It feels so good. I haven't eaten. I've been waiting for you, Melissa said. No kidding, Nicholas put his arm around her. But you can't do that. You and I agreed that you would think of yourself first. I am thinking, she replied. I didn't feel like eating at all. I wanted to talk to you. I really missed you, Nicholas smiled. How was your rest? Nicholas listened patiently to his wife's story. Melissa was watching him closely now. She saw that he was distracted a couple of times, diving somewhere into his own thoughts. He was clearly not interested in what she was telling him, but Nicholas held on. Nicholas, you're falling asleep. Shall we go to bed? She suggested. Yes, let's get tucked in already. I think we need to discuss the power of attorney situation. We will, Melissa smiled. We'll talk it over tomorrow. I'll go to the shop and then straight to the bakeries themselves. I want to reevaluate everything we do and think about how to divide our responsibilities properly. Will you come with me? I have a lot of work to do tomorrow. You know I still haven't found suitable suppliers of flour, sugar. Yes, and the quality of the butter is not too satisfactory to me. I'm going to the country again tomorrow. I'll probably be back by nightfall. Let's go to the notary the day after tomorrow. That's a great idea, Melissa approved. We'll do that. But we'll have to coordinate it somehow. Before we go to the notary, you'll draw up your version of the power of attorney. I'll do mine and we'll compare notes. Thank you, Melissa. Her husband hugged her. You're such a smart girl. I love you so much. Melissa squirmed and nodded. I'm very lucky to have you, she replied. The next day, first thing in the morning, Melissa drove to work. She kept feeling like she was missing something really important, but there was no way she could figure out what. What's up? Jennifer asked. It's hard to get into work after a holiday. How was your husband? He must have been very happy to have you back. Why? Melissa nodded slowly. Yeah, he was glad. Look, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about work. I've been gone a whole 10 days after all. Gotta check things out, see how things are going, Melissa said. I recognize, my friend. You can't be out of work. You're newlyweds and you're acting like, Jennifer replied. Melissa disappeared into her office and immediately dialed Brian's number. You were right yesterday, she said. Nicholas brought up the arrangement right away. I'm at work right now. I need about an hour. I want to check on a few things. Then I'll go straight to packing. He said he'll be gone all day. I'll drive over to your house. I'll meet you there in an hour, Brian replied. Thank you so much for helping, the girl replied. She checked the accounts, making sure that if Nicholas was stealing anything, it wasn't on a large scale. Then, of course, she would need to check everything exactly. But for now, Melissa called the accountant. "Mrs. Beatrice, will you please coordinate all payments with me now? Even the smallest ones. My husband no longer handles the payment issues." "Okay, Melissa, I understand. But my husband doesn't need to talk about it yet. He and I will talk it over later. Just get through today. Please." Melissa finished her business and left the office. "Jennifer," she called out to her friend. "Hold on," Jennifer spoke into the phone. "Yes, Chris, that's right. I'll call you back." Melissa listened. It didn't seem like it to her. Jennifer had just called out Chris' name. "Melissa, what did you want?" Jennifer asked. Melissa blinked slowly. "Sorry, I'm all in my own thoughts today. I can't seem to get myself together properly." "Jennifer, sorry for the indiscreet question. Who were you talking to?" "My cousin." Jennifer looked at her friend, perplexed. "Yes, I remember. Her name is Chris. She has a son, right? And I think she's raising him all by herself." "Yeah, she's got a bad man. She's been torturing herself over him for years," Jennifer replied. Melissa curled her lips. She could barely contain her emotions. A friend, a best friend. She just couldn't help but know that her cousin's lover was Nicholas. So she had kept quiet for so many years, and maybe even supported her sister. What if she's the one who introduced them? "Doesn't your sister want to work for us?" Melissa grinned. Maybe she'd feel better then. Jennifer looked at her friend strangely. "Well, I'll ask, I guess." But she didn't seem to be looking for a job. "Okay," Melissa replied. "I'm off. I probably won't be back tonight. I'll need to talk to you tomorrow." Brian was waiting for Melissa outside the house. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "You're not wearing your face. How did you even get here?" Melissa waved her hand. "If I start talking now, I'll probably burst into tears and won't be able to stop." They went up to the flat. Thankfully, Nicholas wasn't there. Melissa quickly threw the first thing she could find into her suitcase. Brian hadn't come to her empty-handed. He had brought a suitcase and 2 bags. "And you're very thoughtful." The girl smiled slightly. "I'm lucky to have you." The girl stuffed all the bags with things. "I'll pick up the rest after the divorce," she decided. Brian carried all of the girl's things to the car. "Why don't you leave your car here for now?" he suggested. "You're so pale. You shouldn't be driving." "Let me at least move it a couple of yards away," Melissa replied. "I don't want Nicholas to know where my car is." Brian brought the girl back to his flat. "There you go." After a little tour, he said, "Here are the keys. Have you got your phone? I bought you some more food. Over there in the bags, there's cereal, butter, salt, flour. Basically, what you'll need for the first time. But it's not all there, of course. We still have to go to the shop. If you want, we can do it now. You don't have a car." "No," Melissa replied. "Later, everything later." "Did you happen to buy any brews?" the girl asked. "I'd really like some tea. And to catch my breath in general, to think." "I have," replied the man. "Let me put the kettle on. Will you tell me what happened?" "I'll tell you," Melissa replied. When you said the name Chris, I thought I'd heard it somewhere before." So Brian asked, "Do you know her?" "Indirectly," replied the girl. "She's my best friend's cousin, the same one who works for me." "So tomorrow," she sighed, "I just don't know how I'm going to get through the day." "You'll get through it." Nicholas started calling Melissa around 10 p.m. She immediately sent him a text saying she was fine. She wouldn't be coming overnight, but would be at work tomorrow after 11 and would explain everything. Melissa decided that she'd better work things out with her husband and her friend there. There would be other people there after all. Melissa didn't know why, but she was afraid of Nicholas. She filed for divorce this morning. She imagined how ridiculous it looked, just married and divorced. They couldn't live together just to keep people from thinking badly of them. Melissa arrived at work in a depressed mood. For the first time in her life, she opened the door of her own shop with this fear. Nicholas was already there. Nicholas jumped out to meet his wife. "Were you out of your mind? Where have you been? Didn't you come to spend the night? You think I didn't notice your things were gone? Melissa, you're my wife, and you're acting." "Oh, your wife?" Melissa replied. "Let's not yell. There are people around here. Let's go to the study. We'll talk there." Jennifer walked up to them. "Are you all right?" Nicholas said, "You haven't been home overnight." "I'm fine," Melissa replied. "Come by my place a little later today, please. We'll sign the termination papers and you can pick up your paycheck." "What?" Jennifer looked at her friend perplexed. "I don't understand." "And I'll explain," she replied, "first to Nicholas and then to you. You just wait." "You'd think I'd have a choice," she replied. Nicholas entered the office following Melissa. "Well, I think I've got it all figured out," he grinned. "Yeah," Melissa arched her eyebrows. "And what did you realize?" "You're not interested in me anymore," he replied. "You used me to the fullest. Boosted your business, promoted yourself. Now you're firmly on your feet. That's it. You don't need a husband anymore. You went to the sanatorium on purpose and left me in charge. Didn't you like it? Then you don't like me as a manager." Melissa silently applauded her husband. "And you're an artist," she said finally. "Well prepared. Of course you've had all night to think about it. And your second wife, your son, they have nothing to do with this situation, do they?" she asked. Nicholas clearly hadn't expected Melissa to know about his second family. The man's eyes went wide. Melissa saw a flicker of panic on his face, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Melissa, it's not what you think." "Good," she nodded. "Tell me how it really is." "Yes, I have a son, but me and his mother, we're not in a relationship. I just help her out with money. I see the boy sometimes too, very rarely." "Yeah, so how did your son come into the world?" she grinned. "But I don't hide it. I made a mistake. I made a mistake once. I was drunk, and that's what happened. I wanted her to have an abortion, and I only found out she'd given birth when the baby was a year old." Melissa shrugged her shoulders. "Please," the girl pleaded, "stop it. It sounds so awful. I don't know if you're telling the truth or not. I don't even want to hear it. I don't want to think of you as that kind of person, Nicholas." Melissa shook her head. "You lied to me all the time. Our life, everything I valued, everything I believed in, all lies. Oh, I can't be with a man like that. You're fired. We don't work together anymore. I filed for divorce this morning. I will now alert all employees that they are to report to me immediately if they see you on our shop floor or in the bakery." Nicholas looked at his wife for a long moment. "How did you know?" he finally asked. Jennifer couldn't stand it. "She's been threatening to tell me for a long time." Melissa grinned. "No, your accomplice didn't tell me anything. I don't think she would ever tell me. She was just scaring you. After all, she couldn't help but know what betrayal is. I can't forgive." Melissa brushed away the tears that had come. "You've robbed me of two good employees, my best friend and my husband. But just explain to me why I wasted so many years on your business." "I never said a word to you, Melissa. I never denied you anything. I was just there for you, always working, always working. If you'd agreed to make me co-owner 5 years ago, things would have been easier. The two of us could have run the bakery and I would have told you the truth, that I don't, never have. I'd have gone to Chris, and you'd have found another man a long time ago and been on your own. But no, you're not happy with that. The business is all yours." Melissa sighed bitterly. "But I told you right away that this was my baby, that I wouldn't give my bakeries to anyone. But Nicholas, it's not like I kept you around or forced you to work for me. I've offered you several times to start your own business. I was willing to help you even financially, but you always refused." The man grinned. "Of course. First I'd slave for you, and then I'd have to start all over again. Why all of a sudden? Because of you, my favorite woman has suffered for so many years. Chris has to wait all the time." "Chris is your fool because she believes you," Melissa grinned. "You don't love her. You don't do that to the ones you love. And I was a fool because I believed you. But I don't anymore. Get out of here and don't come near my business or me again. I'm not giving you a divorce that easy. We're going to divorce through the courts. I'll get my share." "Try me," Melissa replied. Her husband was already at the door when he suddenly stopped again. "You never told me how you found out about Chris," he reminded. "Is it that important?" Melissa asked tiredly. A terrible apathy suddenly came over her. She was giving all her energy to talking to her husband. "Your friend said," she replied. "Apparently they're sick of you playing with two women at once." "Who exactly said that?" "Ask them yourself," Melissa replied. "Go away, Nicholas, or I'll call the police." The man slammed the door angrily and sprinted out of the office. Melissa's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and smiled slightly. "Hi. You sure have a voice," Brian muttered. "You okay? Need any help?" "I filed for divorce. Talked to my husband. He's got his heart set on going to court for now. We'll see what happens next. Still need to talk to Jennifer," Melissa reported. "Jennifer is a friend?" Brian asked. "Ex-girlfriend," replied Melissa. "Melissa, can I come over in about 40 minutes? I have a conversation to have with you, and then I want to take you to lunch to take your mind off things for a bit." "A conversation?" Melissa asked. "A good one, an important one, not a bad one," replied the man. "I know it's really hard for you right now. Hang in there." "Thanks," the girl sighed. "I'm waiting for you then." Melissa just sat in the silence of her office for a few minutes and then went to find Jennifer. "Did you talk to Nicholas?" she asked her former friend. "Do you know what this is about?" "Melissa," Jennifer looked up at her with guilty eyes. "I didn't mean to, really. I'm sorry if you can." "Yeah, I'm not the one who brought them together. You don't think I did. They met without me somehow. Chris tracked him down on purpose. It's my fault, of course, for admiring Nicholas and your relationship so much, telling her so much. So she got jealous. And it wasn't Nicholas's fault either. She seduced him." "Cool. It wasn't everyone's fault and everyone lied to me. And their son, by the way, is 5 years old. Did it never once occur to you in 5 years that it might hurt me too? That I was living a lie all the time? No, it was okay for you to look me in the eye every day, to listen to me prepare for my wedding. Remember when you told me about Brian? I told you that you should cancel, that you should tell Nicholas the truth, that you shouldn't marry him. I wanted you to leave him, to start a new life." "Jennifer, that was a month ago," Melissa sighed tiredly. "You had plenty of opportunities to tell me the truth before that, but you chose to keep quiet. Have pity on me. I don't have the energy to listen to any more of your excuses today. Sign all the papers and leave. I agree to fire you on your own recognizance." "And who will work in my place?" Jennifer grinned. "Yeah, your whole lauded bakery will fall apart without me." Melissa grinned. "You're forgetting the fact," she replied, "that I'm not a bad technologist either." After Jennifer left, Melissa contacted her accountant. "There will need to be a full audit," she said. "I already realized yesterday that you suspected your husband of something, so I started an audit. I always check the accounts thoroughly, and I'm sure there are no errors in the internal records. But recently your husband changed oil suppliers and the bills went up significantly. I was surprised at the time, and he said the quality of the new oil was much better. Today, forgive me for being amateurish, I called the new suppliers, introduced myself as a potential new customer, and asked them to invoice me for 50 liters of oil. Well, they charged me a lower price. Looks like Nicholas was working on kickbacks. Perfect. Melissa sighed. Now it turns out we need to check all the suppliers. That's easy. And in doing so, we don't have someone to do Nicholas' current job. Great. Melissa was very frustrated. If she could handle production on her own, everything else. Soon there was a knock on the door. Yeah, hi. Brian peeked into the office. How are you doing in here? Still alive? Barely, Melissa sighed. Come on in. Do you want coffee? Only with fresh pastries, he smiled broadly. You smell mind-blowing in here. Following Brian, another man entered the office. To meet Tom, a close friend of mine. Let's talk, Melissa replied, still not quite sure what was going on. This is my resume, he informed her, due to life circumstances. I'm looking for a job, and Brian said I might be a good fit. Melissa looked at Tom's resume. His track record was impressive. Can I ask? She finally tore herself away from the resume. The man nodded. That's what I'm here for. When your last place of employment was with a very large company, and as far as I know, the pay there is excellent. Why did you quit? My son got sick. Once a week, sometimes a little more often, sometimes less often, I have to take him to the hospital during the day, which means taking a few hours off work. I could work that time earlier or later, but you see, my current firm is not happy with the situation. I need money for my son's treatment, and I need a job where I can schedule my own hours. Melissa, I don't know your middle name. Just Melissa. I can stay late until 10:11. If I understand, the girl nodded. Tom, let's give it a try. I don't care at all how much time you spend at work. All that matters to me is that the job gets done, and I'm sure we can adjust to your son's treatment schedule. Brian, the girl smiled slightly at the man. Thank you so much for that. You are simply my savior. Come on, I'll treat you to something delicious. I need to talk to you. Am I coming to work or home? He asked. Home, Melissa replied. I'll be home around 7. Brian knew that the girl would soon be facing a court hearing. Nicholas refused to divorce for nothing, and yet he had filed for property division. How are you doing? Brian asked. Barely Melissa opened the door. Nervous a lot, she nodded. Can't find a place to be. What do you smell so good? Immediately the man smelled it. It's a pie from a new recipe I baked. I want to try to sell it at the bakery. You're the first to taste it. I'll take it to the guys at the shop. Tom says this is his most delicious workplace. I keep forgetting to ask you, how do you two work together? Brian said. I know from him that he's pleased. Has thanked me 100 times already. I'm pleased too. In fact, he works even better than Nicholas. Doesn't argue, doesn't come up with any complicated schemes. Everything is quick and clear. Well, I'm just glad. Brian, tell me everything will be okay tomorrow, Melissa suddenly pleaded. Of course it will be, he marveled. Melissa, we've discussed this 100 times, both the two of us and the lawyer. The bakeries are yours. He was just working for you under an employment contract. You made no promises to him. But he's still my husband. Yes, only he married you because he wanted to take over your business. Calm down and treat me to your wonderful pie. Brian, I actually didn't just want to talk about the trial, she remembered. Yeah? Brian was surprised. I thought you couldn't think of anything else today. Did something else happen? I've been living in your flat for over a month now and I haven't paid you a penny. You can't do that. I've talked to a realtor, looked at a few flats, but to tell you the truth, they're all much worse than yours. And I love it here. I feel totally at peace here. Anyway, Brian, please let you start charging me rent. Melissa, what are you talking about? Well, I can't just live here for free. I keep feeling like it's wrong. Melissa, I wanted to talk to you about this after court. Thought you needed some time. But since you're putting me in this situation, let's talk about it today." "About what?" the girl wondered. "The rent. I'm not going to charge you." "Well, Brian," Melissa began to object. "You just don't understand." "Let me finish," Brian pleaded. "I'm not pressuring you. I understand divorce isn't easy. You're worried about your bakeries. But the way I felt about you when I first saw you hasn't gone anywhere. And I know you still have those feelings, too. I'm just waiting for the right time for you to let it all go a little bit and be ready to get on with your life. So, first of all, my future girlfriend needs to live in a nice and safe place. Secondly, there's no way I'm charging her rent. So just settle down and live here. There is, however, one more option." "What's that?" Melissa asked, biting her lip. "You could move into the flat where I live now." "And where are you going?" Melissa didn't understand. Brian bowed his head, waiting for her to understand. "Aha," Melissa finally stretched out. "No, I'm sorry. I'm not ready for that yet." The next day in the courtroom, the girl was very nervous. She could feel her voice shaking as she answered the judge's questions. Nicholas, on the other hand, was very aggressive. He was snapping, several times started shouting at Melissa and even at the judge. Of course, this played a role. The divorce went through and the bakeries were left to Melissa. "Mrs. Vanessa," the girl hugged her lawyer, "you've helped me so much." "Melissa, Will, you and I have discussed 1,000 times that this is exactly how it was going to be. You did good, you held up well, even though you were nervous. I'll appeal later." Nicholas flew up to them. "You're not just going to get rid of me like that." Melissa sighed convulsively and looked at Mrs. Vanessa. She only shook her head negatively. "The decision here is unequivocal. You have nothing to worry about. You don't even have to go to future trials if there are any. Melissa, forget this story and be happy." After leaving the courthouse, Melissa wandered the streets for almost 2 hours and then remembered that her phone was lying switched off in her bag and she hadn't told anyone how the trial had ended. She hurriedly removed it from her purse. Sure enough, there were missed calls from colleagues, parents, and as many as 5 from Brian. He was the first one the girl called. Finally, he answered instantly. "Melissa, I almost lost my mind. Were you in court that long?" "No, it ended 2 hours ago. I was out for a walk." "You should have at least let me know you were okay." "Yeah, I know. I'm sorry." "Oh, how did it go?" "Great." Melissa smiled. "I'm not married anymore. He wasn't able to sue me out of the bakery. So I'm really, really glad." "I'm glad too. Listen, Melissa, you probably got a call from work, didn't you?" "They did," she confirmed. "I'm the one who put everyone on edge. I'm sorry. I was worried." "Nice to meet you," Melissa said. "Listen, as your future girlfriend, I wanted to invite you over for a celebratory dinner tonight. Will you come?" "I'd love to," Brian replied, just in time to discuss the coming of that very future.
The highway leading through the wooded area from the village to the main highway was in fairly good condition. But John, who was sitting behind the wheel, didn't press the gas. Even though the bends of the road were not too steep, but he, as an experienced driver, was well aware of how sad the consequences of a sudden appearance of a wild animal in front of the car could be. So the man, having taken the passenger to a cozy remote village, leisurely returned to the city. Besides, it was quite possible to finish the work for today. After all, this order went surprisingly smoothly and brought excellent tips. The amount is quite comparable to the cost of the trip. The elderly passenger, who was helped into the car by a restless young girl, turned out to be very pleasant. At first, the lady, to whom the word "old lady" did not fit, was reading something on her smartphone, and then she began to look thoughtfully at the landscape outside the cab window. For fun, John sometimes tried to guess the occupation of the person he was helping to comfortably travel by car. Of course, such distractions from the road did not happen too often. But when the situation permitted, the driver allowed himself an innocent amusement and was often right in his guesses. And today he was sneaking glances at the passenger. He began to speculate. Her clothes were nice and fairly new. Her hair was impeccable, even after the woman had pulled back the hood of her light cloak. Understated makeup, some kind of peculiarly straight posture. The woman noticed that the cabbie was looking at her and gave him a direct stare, as if looking straight into his soul. John felt uncomfortable and hastily clarified. "Should I change the temperature or leave it at that?" The passenger's well-practiced voice was soft, but clear and coherent. "Thank you. Everything is fine." John was wondering who this woman with a royal posture, towering in the back seat of his car. He also thought that the passenger, like his mother, had devoted many years of her life to the difficult work of a teacher. Except that the deference and fidgetiness shown by the young escort hinted at a higher status. Maybe the old lady had advanced in her career to the position of school principal, or had been a famous actress or singer in the past. However, the look of this passenger seemed to reject the possibility of extraneous conversations in advance. From the very beginning, John thought that the passenger was a retired judge. He had already had encounters with people of this profession in his life, and frankly speaking, he disliked them. They decide the fates, often without delving into the circumstances of cases, acting quite unjustly. And all this under cover of numbers of articles of laws. Ugh, they think they're gods. When the lady first came out of the entrance, she seemed arrogant, and the driver even felt something very close to inexplicable dislike. Very soon, however, John's impression changed to the opposite. Observing the passenger's behavior, he realized that she was sharply different from those to whom everyone around him is eternally indebted. The woman gently calmed down the girl who was fussily helping her, who had managed to drop one of the bulky bags and was loudly lamenting about the forgotten item. The lady said a polite hello to him, to what a far cry from her customers, and reassuringly wished the remaining assistant a good end to her day. It would seem that these were trifles, manifestations of elementary courtesy and nothing more. For some reason, however, these details pleased John. Here was the end of the trip, which had passed almost in complete silence, when the car had already entered the village. As the car approached its destination, the man saw a radiant smile flicker across the passenger's lips and instantly transform her face. The car passed a boy walking along the curb with a shaggy dog on a leash. This couple, obviously pleased with each other's company, was apparently either familiar to the lady or evoked some pleasant memories. Having parked the car in the specified place, John helped the passenger to take things out of the trunk and wanted to offer to carry them. But a very young boy, running from the gate, beat him to it. After giving the cabbie a hostile look, the young man began to pull out the bags. The lady handed John a few bills and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. "Thank you, a wonderful trip. You drive the car perfectly, as if you could feel it like a living thing. Goodbye." Honesty prevented John from taking the outstretched money, he reported. "Actually, your trip has already been paid for non-cash, so have a good day." The woman smiled. "I know it's for you personally. Dispose of it as you see fit. Go home early, get some rest or something. While I was driving, I read about the cute custom of paying for the next person in the coffee shop. It's called a suspended coffee." Meanwhile, the nimble young man, who was still casting suspicious glances at John, carried all of his belongings and respectfully extended his hand to help me up the steps. The passenger once more offered to the driver. Take it. It would really be fun if you could help someone in need to get where they need to go. Good luck to you." John did not refuse and thanked the woman, said goodbye and drove off. Dusk was just beginning to fall, and the road was a little faded after the recent rain. There was no point in driving with the gas pedal to the floor. No one was waiting for him at the rented apartment. His mother lived in another city and flatly refused to move. It was as if she had put down roots at her job at the school, an institution familiar to every corner, which for several years had been threatened to be overhauled. But the volume of this event was so large that even during the long summer vacation was not to cope. So it turned out that in some offices his mother literally knew every nail in the face. After all, she, together with colleagues and parents, many of whom had to teach, repaired classrooms and corridors, not relying on the generosity of the budget. Her mother had long hinted to her only son that he should move in with her, but John was ashamed to return to his homeland. It seemed to him that the ubiquitous and chatty gossipers would teach and remind him of what he himself had tried so hard to forget. Really, how could one be proud of such a sad experience? Especially when your mother had spent her whole life teaching her children goodness, light, eternal values. These thoughts, which again, uninvited, appeared in his head, made the cab driver's mood worsen. After all, he had not gone to prison because he was a criminal. He hadn't hurt anyone. It was only John's fault for being too gullible that he had to do the time. How proud his mother, father, and wife had been when he'd managed to get a job in a bank after graduation. And how much grief had this supposed good fortune brought to their family. John diligently went into all the nuances of the work and acted strictly according to the job description, but did not notice how he was the only suspect in the organization of a large-scale crime. The cunning manager managed to twist the ongoing investigation in such a way as to get away with it, and John was unable to prove his innocence. The lawyer seemed to try to build a defense, but without success. The father died of a heart attack shortly after learning of the verdict for his only son. His adoring wife, Jennifer, decided to divorce him. Only his mother waited for him and fought for her son to leave the prison walls as soon as possible. After his release, of course, John had a hard time. He didn't get a good job, so he had to make do with casual labor, and then decided that the only more or less reliable hope for stability and financial independence is his ability to drive a car. Thanks to his father, who taught him the wisdom of driving and car care starting almost from kindergarten, having issued a new license to replace the expired ones. The unlucky former bank clerk and ex-convict became a cab driver. Relationships with women somehow did not add up, and in his 30s the man became an inveterate bachelor. To the prospective grooms he could not be attributed, because the wealth of John, of course, could not boast. In addition, purposefully looking for his happiness, he just did not want to. Long betrayal of his wife was still an unhealed wound. Small love affairs ended in separation, and John was not too broken about his loneliness. His mother, rapidly losing her health, was the only person he lived for now. John sent her money regularly, and in the fall he came to help her buy vegetables for the winter. It had only been a couple weeks. How he had parted from his mother after another brief encounter, but the man missed her desperately again. How good and peaceful he felt when she stroked his head as if in passing, or carefully adjusted his blanket when he was on the verge of sleep. But John couldn't afford to stay in his hometown and have everyone pointing fingers at his mother or himself. He was afraid he would lose his temper, punish the gossipers and abusers, and go back to prison. No, it was better to come for a few days, and then hide from gossip and worried looks in a metropolis alien in spirit and mood, where no one is interested in anyone. Here, even about neighbors on the landing is not known. And John was happy and completely satisfied with it. And having caught up with his memories, the cab driver tried to switch to other thoughts, but there were practically no positive ones among them. The leisurely return to the city was a good time to think about the incidents that had happened to him during the years he had been working in the cab. Not all the passengers had been as complacent as the elegant lady who had left the cab a short time ago. They had tried to rip John off, and they had tried to run away from the car without paying. The stretch of road through the woods had long since ended. A little more, and ahead would appear a series of dacha settlements, which were especially picturesque in spring and early fall. Almost immediately after them, about 15 minutes away, the house where John had rented an apartment would appear. Not so long ago, the traffic had been incredibly heavy, but now that the harvest was almost over and only a few late apples were hanging, the cottages looked abandoned and deserted, and the road was almost empty. John wanted to pass through these not very cheerful places. But suddenly, as he passed one of the stops, he noticed a figure lying on a bench. Nearby was a wheeled cart, a sure sign of experienced dacha dwellers, who, like industrious ants, haul the crops from their dachas to their city apartments. The cab driver did not consider himself an evil person, but he caught himself thinking that the first thing he wanted to do was to press the gas pedal. However, having figured out that the season, when the municipality runs public transport to dachas, was already over, he realized that a stranger could not hope for a shuttle bus to arrive. John carefully slowed down, parked the car on the side of the road to find out maybe the man became ill, needs medical help, or just needs to get to the city. After all, no one was waiting for him at home, and the words of a recent passenger suddenly popped into his head. John got out of the car, stretched his legs a little, and approached the bench. For a second, the cab driver felt uneasy, because the man didn't react to the knocking of the door or the sound of footsteps. "Hey, buddy," John called out. "Are you all right? Alive or what?" The body moved. Then the man turned, sat down on the bench, and looked at the cab driver. John saw before him not a man at all, but a rather young girl, and he looked at the stranger with surprise. Her clothes were even worse than those which country people wear to visit their plots, and were more like those of a scarecrow. The old-fashioned jacket, which was fashionable to wear 30 years ago, was clearly too big for the girl, and the knitted hat pulled low on her forehead looked visibly shabby. The image was completed by the sneakers, which had obviously seen a lot in their lifetime. All in all, the stranger looked like a vagrant or a beggar, like those who sat at church gates. John was in no hurry to draw conclusions. There was no telling what might have happened to the girl's normal clothes. Maybe she had to wear things exiled to the country estate due to some insurmountable circumstances. There was no odor of alcohol. Yes, and in general, the stranger had too clear a look. Trying not to frighten her, John began to speak soothingly. "I don't know if you know or not, but there will definitely be no dacha bus. I listen to the radio all the time, and they said on the news that the season is over. So if you are going to the city, I can give you a ride." In the eyes of the stranger was clearly visible fear, and at the same time there was a desire to be in a cozier place than this wind-blown stop. And in a hoarse voice the girl confessed, "It would be nice to get to town, but I have money only for a loaf of bread." "Don't you have money to pay for it?" John could not help but laugh at the amazing coincidence, and hurried to explain the situation to the stranger, who seemed about to run away. "By happy coincidence, it turned out that your trip has already been paid for by my recent passenger. Especially since I'm going into town myself. It's not all about the money. Sometimes it's good to show a little humanity. Why don't I give you a ride on the way?" The girl's look was still distrustful, and the man, who himself wanted to get home as soon as possible, and not to stand on the highway, experiencing the gusts of the rising wind, had to hurry her. "Here, decide whether you're going or not. I'm not going to hurt you in any way, by the way. If you believe me, let's get in the car and go." "Well, there's no judgment. Maybe some other kind driver will feel sorry for you." The stranger rose abruptly from the bench, picked up her wheeled bag, and answered the cab driver. "I'm ready." On the way to the car, John noticed that his companion was obviously cold, although maybe she was shivering from excitement. The cab driver didn't bother to find out why, but simply turned on the heater and concentrated on the road. The passenger, who sat in the front seat next to him, placed her bag in her legs, fastened her seatbelt, and seemed to disconnect from reality. John didn't talk to the stranger, and she didn't talk either. Only when the car was almost entering the city, the man specified, "Where should I take you?" The girl shuddered, as if breaking out of a stupor, and after a few seconds, clearly thinking something over, answered, "Now there will be a 24-hour stall and I can go out. Or, if it's not too much trouble, turn right, and I'll be there in 2 blocks. John was a little confused about the destination. As far as he understood his passenger, she was going to one of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods. A neighborhood built up with temporary housing for workers who were erecting a series of factories. It had lasted much longer than planned in the city, but was now living out its last days. Most of the residents were happy to leave the barracks with minimal amenities. Judging by the numerous houses with lit roofs, the centralized heating had already been turned off, and the dwellings had gone to people who simply had nowhere else to live. The residents of this neighborhood almost never used cab services, unless they were plotting to take the proceeds. Strangely enough, the girl didn't look like a criminal or socially depressed. Literate speech, noticeable even by short lines, clearly practiced observance of traffic rules and manners in general indicated that the passenger was hardly a native of this suburb. Having decided that if to do good, then not half, John did not slow down at the stall, as if he had been transported by time machine from the dashing 90s, when the country was in ruins and the cruel laws of survival came into force. Obeying the girl's instructions, he took her where she asked. There was no limit to the man's surprise. The place where his passenger needed to go was not even a house, but actually a ruin. A woman, whose clothes looked even worse than John's, came out of a leaning door, apparently having heard the noise of the car. The girl, having quickly uttered words of gratitude, slipped out of the interior of the car. The cab driver was ready to start from his seat, when he suddenly saw the woman slapping the cheeks of his recent passenger. Then the inhabitant of the dilapidated building began to pull her bag with one hand, without stopping slapping her. The girl did not make any attempt to actively defend herself and simply hid back, but did not let go of her burden. Sighing and mentally cursing himself, John got out of the car, taking his trusty tire iron with him, and went to rescue the girl. She didn't even react to the appearance of the voluntary defender. But the woman with a saintly beaten face began pouring profanity on the man, generously inserting into her swear words the slang typical of people who had been in places not so remote. This was the first time John was glad that he himself had passed the test of prison time, and he quickly explained to the fierce woman that she was wrong. The man asked the girl, "Are you staying here, or are we going farther?" The young stranger angrily snatched her bag from her hands and walked toward the car. John followed her but turned around several times, expecting anything. Fortunately, the precautions were unnecessary, and soon the cab quietly left the scene of the recent ugly scene. The girl did not cry, but sat tense and sometimes shuddered when the car bounced on the bumps, which were plentiful on the outskirts of the city. Silently handing the passenger wet wipes, John concentrated on the road and then offered, "There's a social shelter on the other side of town. They help people in difficult circumstances. If you want, I'll take you there. They have strict rules, but every point is absolutely fair. You can't bring any booze with you. That's the most important condition. And they'll make you work too, but you don't have to pay any money. Contributions are only on a voluntary basis, and they can be made even after a difficult period of life left behind. They helped me out a lot in my time. If it hadn't been for their support, it is unlikely that I would have been able to quickly get out of the hole in my life." The female passenger whispered so quietly that John didn't hear and asked again, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand." The girl repeated, but louder, "Are you tired? So don't think about me. Just give me the address of this shelter and I'll get there myself." John looked at his watch and began to think out loud. "Of course, I could invite you to my place without a second thought. But I live in a rented apartment, and the landlord is strictly forbidden to bring strangers without his prior approval. Look, why don't I drive you to the shelter? There's always someone on duty there, and if you're lucky, someone you know. They'll help you get checked in quickly. Do you have your papers?" The girl nodded in time with the doggy on the dashboard, and realizing that the cab driver's kindness had long since gone beyond the simple desire to give a hitchhiker a ride, began to thank him confusedly. Interrupting the flow of thanks, John asked, "Listen, what's your name, Emily?" "Emily," the passenger whispered. The cabbie hummed at this unexpected correction and introduced himself in response. "Well, I'm John. That's how we met. So pardon the imposition, Emily. But I'm going to ask you a question that's been bothering me. What are some of the sins you just got slapped for?" Even in the encroaching darkness, somewhat dispersed by the glowing instruments, it was noticeable in the parlor how embarrassed the girl was. "That's a long explanation. And to make a long story short, I didn't bring any money or groceries. And in general, I left with my documents, which is strictly forbidden. I myself do not understand why I went back there. I don't know why I went back there." John asked again, "Is that your home there? Or is it some kind of voluntary slavery?" The cab driver didn't wait for Emily's answer, because the girl cried, interrupting the silence with sobs. John parked outside the store and turned to the passenger. "You sit here. I'll go get some groceries. I don't feel comfortable driving empty-handed. Help is always welcome there." Emily didn't even seem to notice John's words. He returned, loaded the bags into the back seat, and the girl had already calmed down and even apologized. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My nerves are a little frayed." The cab driver nodded, letting her know that he understood, and when he had already driven Emily to a well-known shelter, he dared to bother her again. Everyone made it. John took his bag, and they went to get Emily settled in for the night. Afterward, she would decide where she wanted to go. To John's delight, a good friend of his was on duty at the shelter that evening. The old woman opened the door and greeted his former ward cordially. "Oh, John, it's been a long time. What brings you to our land, still working as a driver? Don't you get bored? Come in, darling. I've just made some tea. Take your time. Sit with the old lady, tell her the news." John, putting the bags on the floor, hugged the woman who had always treated him in a motherly way. And she, still talking, noticed a crying girl behind the ajar door and stretched out. "Yes, I see you didn't just drop in to see me or bring some goodies. Come on in and tell me what happened. The cab driver introduced his passenger to the shelter attendant on duty. "Here's our Deborah. I was lucky, although everyone here is a wonderful person. But I'll tell you in confidence that Deborah is the best. There are no unsolvable problems for her, and she always finds wise words to support and comfort. Deborah. And this is Emily. I only met her today, but as far as I can tell, she clearly needs a roof over her head. At least for tonight. And of course your advice, as always, will come in handy." The attendant led the guests into the kitchen, and as she sorted through the packages, she had time to run errands for John and Emily. "Emily, if there are any papers, let me see them. And you, John, take a set of clothes for Emily from the pantry. We keep all sorts of things, and show her where she can wash up. And if she wants to, she can take a shower too." While Emily cleaned herself up, the nimble Deborah set the table with John's help, persuading her former ward to eat dinner as well, scolding him unmercifully. "I know you probably haven't had anything hot but coffee today. I poured both Emily and you some delicious chicken soup with homemade noodles. Let's sit down and have a quiet dinner. Then we can talk. It won't do any good on an empty stomach." Emily, washed and changed, looked even more youthful than she had in the tramp's clothes, which Deborah, with her permission, had already taken to the small room equipped as a laundry. Her passport said she was only 18, but she didn't look it. The overly curious residents of the orphanage who stopped by the kitchen to see who had come to visit so late, Deborah gently sent them to their rooms. "I realize there's not much entertainment here, but we're not here for a performance. You'll get to know each other tomorrow." The woman was obeyed unquestioningly, and she continued to treat John and Emily. When the guests had had enough, Deborah tactfully clarified. "Emily, I realize you don't feel too comfortable right now. You think I'm going to interrogate you. But trust me, you have the right to tell me as much as you feel you need to. If you don't want to say anything at all, that's okay. Sometimes it takes time." But it seemed as if the girl wanted to say something herself. She began her story by thanking John. "Thank you for picking me up at the bus stop. And then when they saw the ugly scene, they didn't leave me to my fate. They brought me here, where I finally made myself look like a human being. I decided at the bus stop that I'd rather be here than go on living this pointless life. And then you showed up, like an angel, even though I didn't deserve to be saved. I came to this cottage for a reason. I thought there was no one there anymore. And I was caught. It's good that the women who detained me didn't call the police and didn't beat me up. They just let me go. They even gave me some apples, but strictly ordered me not to appear in that dacha village again. So I lay down on the bench, feeling ashamed and bitter. Although the weather was not hot, I was terribly embarrassed about the fate I had arranged for myself." Deborah, who had listened to hundreds of confessions, was silent, realizing that the girl was preparing to tell the details of how she had become homeless. John decided to be supportive with words and encouragement. "So you're still very young, Emily. There's time to make things right, however." The cab driver's words had an unexpected effect on Emily. The girl cried, but without hysterical sobs. Then she explained to John and Deborah, who had arrived. "I have already regretted 1,000 times the things I did 6 months ago. It all started when I met Michael. A funny, charming guy, I thought at the time. After classes at the institute, he met me while we were walking home. So entertained me that my stomach ached from laughter. Then I fell head over heels in love with him and started skipping school. What kind of classes could there be when spring was raging and the guy was asking for meetings? Of course. My parents strongly discouraged me from hanging out with Michael. My father said that my favorite is some kind of murky, asked me to give time to collect all available information about Michael and even a little more. My mom begged to listen to my dad's idea too, saying that she had a bad feeling about it and that my obsession with Michael worried her. She hinted and even said outright that he was an Alfonso and would break my heart by betraying me. But I only believed the one I loved. Michael was so convincing that he loved me. Of course I believed him. Not my parents' suspicions. Some usurer of doubts appeared, but I was quick to deal with him. In response to my direct question as to whether his interest was self-serving, Michael even took offense and disappeared for a few days. I was so hurt that once he reappeared, apologized and started kissing me. I fell in love with him even more. My lover and I started meeting secretly because he lived in a hostel and there was nowhere to bring me. About meeting Michael's parents was out of the question. They lived in another state, and my lover planned that when he had a vacation, we would go to them together, in my hometown. I was terrified to appear with Michael in crowded places, so that my parents would not find out about the continuation of the relationship. Amelia, a longtime friend of my mom's, was so supportive. She even gave me her own apartment to go out with Michael, said I was old enough to make my own life. I couldn't keep the secret about the meetings for long. One day I came home, and it was announced to me in an ultimatum form that this connection must necessarily be cut off. I did not give in. The quarrels in our apartment grew more and more frequent, and it smelled of sedatives. I showed up there less and less often, though, sometimes only to sleep over if Amelia's apartment was occupied. My mom was giving me a hard time. Dad threatened to withdraw his financial support, and I was already making plans for married life with the man I loved. I was convinced that I was old enough to have a serious conversation with my foster parents, and it was time to figure things out and live my life. How betrayed and hurt I felt. How so? Because not only had my parents lied to me all my life, but they also wanted to take away my love now. You bought me like a toy and kept me away from my own mother, playing the role of benefactors. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was clearly not in my right mind that I came to the apartment where my childhood had passed. And instead of having a calm conversation, I began to reproach those whom I thought were my parents and curse them for their lies. Emily cried quietly, repeating that she had always wished me well. John sat with a defeated look on his face, then left for the kitchen, probably to avoid listening to my accusations. The woman who had taken me to daycare treated me, taught me lessons, had tears rolling down her cheeks, but those incessant drops didn't touch me at all. I managed to get my real mother Deborah's address from her. John came back with 2 glasses filled with a stinking liquid that smelled like valerian, and almost forced us to drink the sedative. I continued to play the accuser. You're used to buying everything, but money doesn't make you gods who are allowed to decide everything for others, I shouted. My mom did something to calm me down, or maybe it was the sedative. I turned around and went to my room. That was the last night I saw the people who had raised me. During the night, I packed up some of my things, all the jewelry I'd given them, and, in what I now repent, I took the money. My parents never hid their savings from me, they trusted me. And then I even justified myself that it was a moral compensation to me for their lies and interference in my relationship with Michael. Without even leaving a note, I left the apartment. I had 2 goals: to find my birth mom, Deborah, and start a happy new life with her, my brothers and sisters I had been separated from, and of course with Michael. I was not even frightened by the prospect of moving to another city, because my beloved will find work everywhere. I believed that, and I didn't feel bad about dropping out of school. Why would I need a diploma if I had to sacrifice my love for it? I was sure that my lover would support me, so I called him. We met. I confusedly explained what had happened. I invited him to come with me to search for my biological mom, to support me in a difficult moment. But he apologized, saying he had to be at work in the next few days. Michael comforted me, promising to stay in touch. We also agreed that he would find us a rented apartment with the money from my parents' inheritance. I left a little for the road, and the rest of the rather large sum and a bag of jewelry I gave Michael so as not to lose it. After a heated embrace, we parted. It's long to tell how much and by what means I had to search for my birth mom. Fortunately, I had money and rented a room in a nice cozy hostel. I called Michael every day. He sent me photos of apartments for approval. But our conversations were short, a few minutes each. My favorite explained all the hard work and careful selection of our future family nest, and I, tired of fruitless searches, was not the best conversationalist. My biological mom, as it turned out, had managed to change her place of residence several times. And of course, I noticed that the neighborhood was becoming less and less prestigious with each move. After about a week of searching, I reached the dilapidated house where you, John, drove me today. I had accomplished my goal and finally met my birth mom. Strangely enough, she recognized me as soon as I opened the door. "My golden one," she screamed. "My baby girl, my darling. I've been waiting for you to find me someday." We cried for a long time, sitting in each other's arms, unable to talk. Mom confessed that she considered parting with me the worst mistake, for which she had to pay a heavy price. She didn't go into details, but it was obvious that she was addicted to alcohol. When my mom admitted that of my 2 brothers and 3 sisters, none of them were in touch with her. I, of course, immediately suggested that she move in with me. Mom agreed. In high spirits, I told Michael about the long-awaited meeting and asked him to find a bigger apartment. At first, he seemed to share my emotions, congratulated me, rejoiced, but the next day he stopped contacting me. It was impossible to call him, and I was worried that something had happened to him. I couldn't find a place for myself. I didn't have any close, trusted friends, so I called Amelia. Instead of support and help, I received recriminations and accusations. A friend of my foster mom's told me that tragedy had struck. The man I thought was my father had suffered a stroke and was in the hospital. Amelia recounted the circumstances that led to his stroke. It turned out he had gone to the police to file a theft report against me, but hit a tree on the way. My foster dad suddenly felt sick. Fortunately, the speed was low and there were no other casualties. Amelia said that her friend, my foster mother, called me an ungrateful creature, a creep who was the reason my entire well-being was ruined. I didn't have the strength to object. In my heart, I knew that all the insults were well-deserved. I asked Amelia for the number of the hospital, but she strictly forbade me not only to come to town, but even to contact my foster mother. She claimed it would only make things worse and could take away her friend's health as well. Amelia begged me not to call the foster mom, lest she be sent to a hospital bed or, God forbid, to the next world. Hearing me sobbing into the phone, Amelia softened and promised to let me know when the situation was more favorable. She also agreed to go to Michael's dorm to see if anything bad had happened to him. I waited impatiently for news. Soon I heard from Amelia that Michael had been offered a lucrative 6-month shift, and he had left, leaving some of his belongings behind. I calmed down a little, so my lover was fine, and anything could have happened to the phone. I'd called Amelia about once a month for 6 months now, but she asked me not to disturb the people I'd disappointed. I asked her to tell her on my behalf that I was sorry, but she said I was not yet forgiven. I asked if I could come, and she said it was too soon. The foster father needs to get stronger and the mother needs to calm down. Michael still hasn't contacted me, even though by my reckoning he should be back by now. I have to admit, I'm beginning to suspect that he won't even show up. More and more often I think that he turned out to be a fraud and, having embezzled the money and jewelry received from me, just decided to hide. Not only that, but my relationship with my biological mother began to deteriorate as I ran out of money. I sold my smartphone and bought a simple phone instead. But of course that's not enough. The biological mother works unofficially. Or rather, she's trying to work until she gets fired for absenteeism. She set me up to sort of support her. In addition, there were fights because her roommate started to show interest in me. So she tries to see me less at home. And today she sent me to the cottage to clean up the mess. The fact that I came by car made my mother mad, and John witnessed the ugly scene. She slapped me in the face. When she heard that I hadn't managed to bring anything from the cottage, she started to take away my bag. I had my cell phone and passport in it, so I clutched at the handle like a drowning man clutching at straws. These things were my last hope that everything would work out, my last link to the people who were really close to me. It's a good thing you, John, didn't go and get me out of there. I myself realize how wrong I was to take money from people from whom I saw only kindness and care. It turns out they were right about Michael, too. I wish I'd believed them and hurt them by doing that. It was her own fault. But the punishment the foster parents received for their kindness was completely unfair. If Emily had been a little braver, she would have gotten down on her knees and started apologizing. But she feared that they really had cut her out of their lives and didn't want to see her. Even more, she feared that her father would be made worse by her appearance, especially since she couldn't pay back the money she'd taken. Emily was silent. Michael didn't say anything either. Deborah shook her head and didn't beat around the bush. The girl had made a mess of things. But I'm not judging. A young crush can sometimes push even much wiser people into rash behavior. You know, Michael, Emily is absolutely right to apologize to the people who raised her. I understand that she fears their reaction, but it's better to apologize in person to their faces than to cowardly make excuses through an outsider, even a close family friend. Torturing people like this and living in uncertainty herself is wrong. Her biological mom, as I understand it, needs to be rescued from alcoholism. But unfortunately, you can't help someone who doesn't want to. Forcing healthcare against one's will is a hopeless endeavor. There's flavored tea in the cup. Deborah turned to Michael. Michael, are you on shift tomorrow? Realizing what the orphanage attendant was getting at, the cab driver completed her thought by suggesting Emily. How would you feel about going to your town tomorrow morning without putting it off? Especially since tomorrow will be Saturday. Do you think your parents will be home? The confused girl couldn't believe that right now she had a chance to try to correct the mistake she had made. So she nodded silently. Deborah smiled contentedly. Well, if you have to travel to another city, then you should have time to rest. So Emily, I'll organize a sleeping place for you. Michael, I suggest you stay too. There's a spot on the couch in the break room. Or do you want to go back to your place? Michael, after some thought, decided to stay at the shelter. We'll leave from here tomorrow morning. I don't see the point of driving back and forth across town. So, Deborah, I'll take you up on your kind offer. It seemed to Emily like a miracle she'd given up believing in. The desk clerk put the girl up for the night and went back to Michael. As much as he wanted to talk more with the wise Deborah, she firmly ordered him to rest. Michael, you know I'd love to talk to you, but you have to be on the road tomorrow. If you could just be supportive of the girl. Well, the fact that she trusted a scumbag man, that's every other girl in the orphanage. But the story about the money she took from her foster parents is a little more serious. It's a good thing Emily didn't shy away from it. Although it would have been easier to keep quiet and create an all-white and fluffy image. So she's a good girl. You should watch her. Michael just waved her off. Oh, Deborah, do you all need someone to team up with? I have a history of prison. You know that. And we're almost 12 years apart in age. No, Emily's beautiful, but she's not for me. And after my divorce from my wife, I can't find the strength to trust a woman again. Judy blushed with indignation and began to jokingly reprimand the former ward. How did you generalize the entire female sex? Don't take offense. And in general, go and rest. Tomorrow morning, load into the car and go. Michael had no choice but to obey. In the morning, Emily was incredibly nervous, and only by a miracle managed not to spill hot tea served for breakfast. Poor thing's nervous, Michael thought. But he didn't know how to support his casual companion who had come into his life so abruptly. John realized that he did not feel any romantic feelings for the girl who frankly told about his ridiculous love, but for some reason he really wanted to help her. He called the dispatcher to explain that he wouldn't be coming into work. After a quick tidy-up and a delicious breakfast, he took Emily to her foster parents. The cab driver didn't bother the girl with conversation and only asked if she would mind a softly turned-on radio. The hour-and-a-half ride passed in silence, which reflected Emily's tension. John could see that she was questioning the appropriateness of her intended visit. Emily, if it's appropriate, I could go with you, he suggested. As a sort of moral support. I promise I'll be there for you. There was a glint of hope in the girl's eyes. Of course, I'm an adult, and I have to take responsibility for my own misbehavior. But I'd appreciate it if you'd come with me. It's not that I need your help to defend myself against the just anger of Mom and Dad. It's just that I'm afraid, as Amelia warned me, that one of them will get hurt. In that case, your help could be invaluable. A quick trip to the hospital if necessary. John saw Emily's hand shake as she pressed the intercom button. She probably would have run away if he hadn't been there when she heard a woman's voice on the speaker. Who? The girl answered as if all her strength had left her. Mom, it's me, Emily. Emily, my girl. The voice in the speaker was ringing with joy. Come in quickly. The door opened, and John followed Emily, who did not wait for the elevator, and jumping over the steps, strove to get to the people whom, it seems, did not cease to love. On the platform of the 4th floor, the girl literally ran into the arms of a crying woman and a man carefully supporting her by the waist. For a few seconds, only separate words were heard: Emily, Mommy, Daddy, in various variations. John felt awkward, but then a man who appeared to be Emily's adoptive father caught his eye. Coming to his senses, he called everyone into the apartment. Ladies and you, young man, let's go to the apartment. Embarrassed and touched by the family scene, the cab driver had no chance to refuse, for he had promised Emily to stick around. The whole company moved into a cozy, spacious apartment. The woman, as if her life depended on it, hugged Emily again, and the head of the family extended his hand, introducing himself. My name is Thomas, and this woman is Amber, my wife. And what's your name? John the cabbie replied. Thomas led his guest into a spacious room with bookcases along the walls and seated him in a comfortable chair, explaining, It's a pleasure to meet you. You appear to be my daughter's companion, and I'm very grateful to you for bringing her home. We've been waiting over 6 months for her return. Amber wanted to go after her. We knew where she was going, but I told her not to. Emily had always been independent, and she needed to get to the point of wanting to come home on her own. Let your wife and daughter have a little time alone together. In the meantime, tell me honestly, do you have serious intentions toward Emily? John didn't lie and confessed. I, except for the desire to help your daughter, had no other intentions. I met her yesterday by chance and I felt sorry for her. She was obviously in a bad situation and didn't know how to get out of it. I had the time and the opportunity, so I decided to do what I could. And it wasn't much, believe me. While Thomas and John had been having a lively conversation, Amber and Emily had apparently calmed down, and the lady of the house invited the men to the table. Come on, let's go celebrate. We made an order in advance in the nearest cafe, and everything is already prepared. John tried to refuse, but he was persuaded to stay at the table. Emily touched Amber's and Thomas's hands repeatedly, and then began to apologize. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry if you can. I'm such a silly girl. The girl, whose tears had just recently dried up, cried again. Amber stood up and hugged her daughter, comforting her. Come on, sweetie. Daddy and I aren't mad. The only thing is, we were so worried, not knowing where you were or what happened to you. We've been waiting for a phone call from you. If you just keep your mouth shut. It would have been easier for us. Or, if you couldn't overcome yourself, at least call someone you know and let them know how you are and what's going on. John was surprised beyond belief. After all, judging by yesterday's story, Emily regularly called her foster mom's friend, and he silently voiced his bewilderment aloud. Emily and Amelia were in regular contact. Your friend told her not to bother you, said it wasn't the right time to talk, claimed you were here, almost cursing her. Amber was painful to watch. She was truly shocked at this unexpected turn of events. Actually, Amelia's been out of the country for 5 months. And since then, we've only talked to her by email. She keeps calling me to visit, to get away, to relax. Emily looked just as shocked as her foster mom. I don't understand. Amelia at the last conversation a month ago told me that visited you just the day before, and that you are still not ready to accept me with apologies. The girl shifted her gaze from Amber to Thomas, who soon asked her daughter in a strange tone. Emily, call Amelia. Find out how she thinks our apartment is doing. Emily put the phone on speaker, and soon a woman's voice, full of concern and tenderness, came into the room. Emily, it's so good to hear from you, my dear. Unfortunately, I can't give you any good news. Thomas is still not well. He's back in the hospital, and the doctors even hint that his days are numbered. Amber doesn't want to hear from you. When I mention you to her, she cuts the conversation off and moves on to another topic. So girl, you're just going to have to be patient a little longer. Thomas put his finger to his lips, urging his wife to be silent. And Emily, surprisingly coolly, clarified. Amelia, pardon me for clarifying, but when was the last time you were at mine? Is this current news? The voice from the phone answered after a long, sympathetic sigh. Just visited yesterday. So the news is up to date. There's no point in coming back for now. Only Amber will probably go to a hospital bed, too. But don't despair. Call me if you need anything. Emily said goodbye to her foster mom's friend and turned to her dad. How come? Amelia so confidently reported that you were in the hospital and was so worried about Mom, who might have gotten hurt too because of my appearance. Amber added. And about just being at our house yesterday, she said that too. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that Amelia wasn't trying to help and support us at all, but was pursuing her own interests, and we don't know where she really is. Maybe she's not abroad at all. Thomas, as if remembering something, asked John. Excuse me, but could you give me a ride to a place and back? I can't ask a question that needs to be solved over the phone. The cab driver, who himself was wondering what kind of game Amelia was up to with Emily's family, agreed without hesitation. When they arrived at the address Thomas had given them, John gave his passenger an attentive look. Emily's adoptive father could have been, in his opinion, a lawyer or a mid-ranking official. And the cabbie was leaning toward the second version after all. Not 15 minutes later, Thomas returned to the cab. The man looked dejected and shared his worries with John on the way home. Anyway, It looks like it was Amelia who was involved in Emily losing her head over that sneaky Michael. I just found out that it was none other than my daughter Emily's boyfriend who was in the seat next to her on the plane. That's a little too unlikely for a coincidence, don't you think? And this Michael won Emily's favor too easily, playing on common interests and tastes. She didn't like him, as I recall. And Michael and I had no idea that our girl had been charmed at the instigation of that sneaky Amelia. How cleverly she kept Emily at a distance from us. How masterfully she played on her feelings of guilt. I don't know how I'm going to tell Michael and my daughter. John, caught up in the tangled story, had to stay with Deborah's family. Thomas, softening the news, explained to his wife Amber and adopted daughter that Amelia's actions are like a premeditated action. All the coincidences were too coincidental to keep us apart. I just don't understand why she did it, he said to his wife. Do you have any thoughts about the motives of your so-called friend? Except for self-interest, of course. It could have been easier to get money out of us, but she so froze to hurt us. The woman was confused. I don't understand. We didn't seem to have any big fights. I've always helped in any way I could. Unless. Amber stopped talking and Thomas rushed her. Well, is there something you've stalled on, a thought you've had? Well, when you and I started dating, she tried to beg me to give you up to her. But after I said no, she seemed to calm down. But a 25-year-old grudge can't be the cause of this nightmare we've been living for months. Taking advantage of the silence in the room, John hurried to say goodbye, connecting with his family. Well, I wish you all happiness. Goodbye. Thomas once again thanked the cabbie for his concern. Amber handed over a bag of tissues from the cafe. These aren't even open servings. Take them. Don't say no. At least it'll save you a few times the trouble of cooking. John was returning to New York, which had become his temporary home, and he was glad that he had not passed by someone else's misfortune. May harmony be restored to their family in spite of all their trials, he thought. He wanted desperately to go to his mother's home in Chicago, but instead he overcame a momentary weakness. The man contacted the dispatch, and he even managed to take a few orders, just to delay the moment of returning to the apartment, where no one was waiting for him. As in a whirl of orders, John did not think about Emily and her family. But one evening he got a call from Deborah. John, hello, I'm calling to warn you. There's a situation. A very distinguished-looking man arrived at the orphanage an hour ago. He said he was Thomas, the father of that girl Emily. Remember, he brought some stuff as a thank you. I don't know what for. And then he asked for your phone number. I left it in my office under false pretenses, so I thought I'd call and ask you. Did you have any problems with this passenger? Can I give this unexpected guest your phone number? The cab driver was surprised, but answered. It's fine, my dear Deborah. Thank you for your concern. By the way, it was talking to you that helped Emily decide to go to her parents. So consider all these gifts as payment for your psychological help. Feel free to give me my number. Thomas seemed like a great man. And the fact that he brought things to the shelter says a lot about him. Shortly after John finished talking to Deborah, he got another call. It was Thomas, offering to meet at any convenient place and time. The cab driver, who was just going through a lull in bookings, didn't refuse, and soon the men were comfortably seated at a cafe table. The loud music playing in the hall did not interfere with the conversation. Thomas took the initiative, suggesting, John, how would you feel about changing jobs? You can't always be driving. It's a dangerous profession from every angle and not very healthy. I suggest you join my firm. There's a good vacancy in the commercial department for a good man. And I see you in that position. The cab driver was dumbfounded, but decided to come clean. Thomas, I realize I can't drive a cab for the rest of my life. But you'll take back your offer when you hear about my criminal record. An economic conviction. Of course you won't believe this, but I wasn't really in jail for anything. Actually, it was for being too trusting. So thank you for your kindness for the offer. But we won't be able to cooperate. But Thomas is suddenly interested. I'm very curious. I have a lot of good lawyers who can get justice. So it's quite possible to achieve full rehabilitation and even compensation, John admitted. To be honest, I don't believe in justice at all anymore. I have a mother, so much money invested in trying to justify me, that it is terrible to remember. Only a good apartment had to be exchanged, and it was no use. I'm afraid it won't work now. Except for dashed hopes. except that John did not take into account the character of the military father, who is accustomed to fight for the truth. The man made a suggestion. "How about this, you give me all the data on your case?" "I insist on that." "At the same time, you take a vacation in your cab service and take an internship, paid, by the way, at my firm. If you like it, you'll get a job. If you don't like it, we'll part on friendly terms. I don't think you're risking anything, and neither am I. But it's a chance to make a difference. How's that?" John couldn't resist such possibilities and answered, "It's a deal, Thomas. Thank you very much." "You're welcome for now," the man smiled. "I'm with my wife before you. And Deborah owes me a debt of gratitude for bringing her daughter home. So this is only a small part of the thanks." John took Thomas's advice, and after a brief conversation with the cab driver and the landlord, he packed his bags and moved to the city, where a new job awaited him. Amber helped him find a place to live. And John felt as if he had wings at his back from the fact that people he didn't know suddenly took such an active part in his fate. After a preliminary call, John met with a lawyer. To the surprise of the former cab driver, his case was taken up by a charming blonde in a colored artificial coat, which did not give the impression of an intricate connoisseur of the law. But it turned out to be a delusion. "Don't worry," she explained to John's puzzled look. "My appearance is just an extra effect to deflect the eyes of my opponents. I'm just coming back from a meeting, and without too much modesty, I'm bragging that justice has won." Then the woman instantly adopted a businesslike tone and suggested to her new client, "John, let's see what's in your file. And then you calmly and honestly, without hiding any unpleasant moments, tell me everything. Let's see what ideas come up." John did not really believe that after years it would be realistic to restore justice. But the lawyer turned out to be a real fury in fighting for his case. She was so meticulously analyzed all the circumstances that it became almost obvious to the man his name, although late, but still will be cleared of shame. Even if everything was not very fast, but the result was worth the wait. John was incredibly proud to tell his mother that now they do not have to be ashamed of the sad fact in his biography. "Mom, you can imagine the lawyer got justice. Not only that, but I'm also entitled to monetary compensation, so you could look for a more comfortable apartment." The elderly woman was incredibly happy for her son, to whom it seemed that luck finally turned to face. She confessed, "Oh, Sonny, and I was stupid, and did not believe that so everything will work out. I thought again, upstart money, even if not from us this time, but from your boss, Thomas. Hey, John, thank God everything worked out. It's just a shame you didn't meet these wonderful people sooner. Then maybe your father would be alive and well now. Hey, but what's to think about now?" John's mom was silent for a moment, then asked, "Son, maybe you'll go back to your homeland now. I missed you very much. Now no one will dare to blame and reproach you." The former cab driver also had thoughts of returning to his hometown, like angry autumn flies. But he didn't want to let down Thomas, who had entrusted him with a position in his firm. John tried not to give his boss any reason to be unhappy with him, and was frankly afraid of his reaction to the news of his decision to move. Occasionally meeting Emily, Thomas's daughter, John rejoiced at the transformation of the girl who had returned to the people who loved her. One day Emily said hello. "Excuse me, I need your help again, or rather my biological mom. I think about her every day. Let her be who she is. But I'm embarrassed that I'm doing so well, as they say, all chocolate, and she's probably barely making ends meet just to buy booze. I don't want to go back to her. I've tried it before. It just hurt everyone. I'm afraid to contact my foster parents to avoid hurting them, so I decided to contact you. Do you think it is possible to put my biological mother in some rehabilitation center? I'm working right now, and I'm willing to pay for services to bring her back to a normal human state." John had an epiphany. "I know someone who can answer that question quickly. I think Deborah would be happy to hear from you and help in any way she can. And if you want my opinion, you don't have to hide your intentions from Amber and Thomas. I think they'll appreciate your generosity. You're acting like a real man, which is something to be proud of." The girl thanked the former cab driver who had changed her fate so dramatically and contacted Deborah. Soon the changes affected Emily's biological mother, because Deborah, who was used to doing everything well, took over. There was every chance that the woman would successfully rid herself of her bad habits. Emily shared updates with John about how her birth mom was doing. And despite all attempts not to fall in love, The man fell under the charm of a cute girl. They had already switched to you and occasionally went to the diner, laughing at the conventions. John was uncomfortable that he was attracted to the daughter of the boss who had done so much for him. Deciding that he should move out of harm's way, John headed over to Thomas. Of course, the subordinate did not confess to the boss that the main motive for leaving the career that had just begun to develop was a crush on Emily, and told only about the fact that mom needs care. Thomas did not become indignant, and even promised to give John the best characterization if necessary. Before leaving, no matter how hard John tried to avoid it, he still met with Emily. She caught up with him at the end of the hallway and held him by the sleeve of his jacket, forcing him to turn to her and linger longer than was necessary for a simple greeting. "John, is it just me, or are you hiding from me?" The man had no choice but to lie. "Hello, Emily. Is it your imagination? It's just that I'm getting ready to move and have to do everything almost on the run. So I apologize if somewhere maybe I ran by without stopping." Emily's sly squint made it clear that the girl didn't believe him one bit, which was why she asked another provocative question. "Why, and now, when I caught you by the sleeve? You didn't turn around on purpose when you noticed me." John tried to turn the conversation to a neutral topic. "Emily, how is your birth mom doing? What does Deborah say? Can she be picked up from the rehab center soon?" The emotion on Emily's face disappeared. She admitted that freeing a relative from her vices is not easy, and added, "You're probably avoiding me also because you fear bad heredity." John was so indignant that he involuntarily burst out. "How stupid you are. You've had an angelic appearance and a brilliant upbringing. You're beautiful and smart. Why are you so insecure?" Emily blushed. She had certainly caught John's sympathy, but he had never paid her even disguised compliments before, hardly resembling simple friendship. The girl was scared to trust a man again, but she felt drawn to John, so she held his sleeve and offered, "My mom, Amber, has an anniversary this coming weekend. If you're interested in how my wandering story ends, be sure to come by." Emily quickly, before John realized it, begged him to come, promising him she would. "The birthday girl would be very happy to have you come. Mom considers you a family friend after you brought me home. I'll tell you, there's a huge surprise in store for everyone there." Later, John received a formal invitation from Thomas and headed to the celebration at the appointed time, not even realizing how memorable it would turn out to be. Before the party began, with only Amber, Thomas, Emily, and himself in the banquet room, the doors swung open. A slender, tanned woman with a stunning gait strode toward the birthday girl standing at the empty counter of a hired footman. Emily, seeing the guest, purposely went behind John's broad back and pulled out her cell phone. The woman, walking up to Amber, began her congratulatory speech. "Amber, heartfelt congratulations to you." Suddenly there was the trill of a cell phone. The woman glanced at the screen, dropped the call, and continued her speech with a smile, but she was interrupted again by the ringing. Amber prompted, "Amelia, I'm glad you took the time. To finish talking, take the call." The friend who had arrived from abroad waved her hands and had already switched off her smartphone when Emily called out to her. "Why do not answer me and Amelia just news? I want to know if I can go home or am I still cursed on winter evenings?" Even the tan didn't hide the blush on her guest's cheeks, but she tried to feign joy. "Emily, and you're here. How glad I am that Amber and Thomas have found the strength to forgive you and you're back together. That's a big deal. Let's celebrate." Amelia slapped herself on the forehead and laughed. "I forgot my present in the car. Wait a second, 1 foot here, 1 foot there. I'll get it." Amelia couldn't get past Thomas and John at the door, however. Giggling, she hurried to the emergency exit. But her escape-like maneuver was interrupted by the birthday girl. "Amelia, please explain why you hate me so much that you decided to separate me even from my daughter. I have only once failed to yield to you, and you've invented a trial you wouldn't wish on an enemy. Just answer me why." Panic flashed across the guest's face, but she admitted it was out of jealousy. "You've always been the best, and I'm always in the background. You think it's easy to fall short. I've been looking for your weakness for a long time. Your husband turned out to be your husband, so I went after your daughter with the help of Michael the catcher. Then it was a matter of technique. You can't prove my guilt, and you can kiss your money goodbye." But Amelia was wrong. Thanks to Thomas's connections, Michael was extradited, and together with Amelia, he was put under investigation. A little later, they were sentenced. Emily and John's relationship grew more tender by the day. Of course, it didn't go unnoticed for long, as both Amber and Thomas were now closely watching every change in their child's mood. The girl believed in love again, and it was impossible not to notice it. John already had his labor book in hand when his boss invited him into the office where his wife and daughter were already there. Smiling, Thomas said, "Now that's a role I never thought I'd ever find myself in, but John seems to be too decent. My wife and I have long noticed that you have a soft spot for Emily and are trying to keep your feelings in check. Well, we don't mind you two dating. We even agree that the two of you should go to your homeland to think about and decide where you'd like to live. Amber and I agree to whatever you decide in advance." John and Emily couldn't believe their happiness. After a visit to the man's mom in her hometown, they decided to take her in and settle closer to the girl's adoptive parents. This decision satisfied everyone without exception.
Emily, a third grader, came home from school with a snowman in her hands that was so small it fit in the palm of her hand. She quickly stuffed the snowman into the freezer, delighted with her ingenuity. She wanted to please her mother, who had been sad and tired at work lately. She worked as a janitor in a huge office where every little thing was scrutinized. In addition, Emily recently learned that her mother, Sarah, is secretly in love with her boss, Frederick Ives. The daughter accidentally overheard her mother talking to her friend. "Gee, Sarah," the friend marveled, "you have to fall in love like that. After all, he's your boss, and you're just a simple cleaning lady. This Frederick is a real handsome man. A good-looking man, a man of fortune. He doesn't even notice people like us. Be careful. You might get burned one of these days." "I know, Tess, I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid," Sarah sighed. "But you can't help what your heart tells you to do." "Have you confessed your feelings to him yet?" Tess asked. "No, of course not." "Have you what?" Sarah exclaimed. "Who am I and who is he? I'd be laughed at by those office hotties if they knew. And Frederick Ives himself doesn't think I'm anything. I'm like a pesky fly to him. When I go into his office to clean, he wrinkles his nose and walks away." "Oh, my advice to you, my dear. Keep your love to yourself," Tess worried. "However, there may be trouble. You have a daughter in your arms, after all. Don't forget that." When Emily went into the kitchen to get some candy, her friends were silent, pretending that nothing had happened. But Emily heard everything. And so in her pretty little head a plan matured: how to get a daddy. Little Emily dreamed of a father as soon as she went to the kindergarten and saw that the other children had not only moms, but also dads who took their kids sledding, made snowballs, and drove cars. And the dads were also strong, and that's what her mom lacked. The girl reached out to her dads. She often stood nearby, listening to fathers interacting with their children. This drew the jealousy of the other children upon her. "Get out of here." "That's my daddy," shouted Mike one day, and shoved 4-year-old Emily painfully. "Mike, you can't do that." "You're a man," said his father, and took the crying Emily in his arms. "Are you hurt bad?" "I apologize to my son for being rude." The tears dried instantly. It was the first time she'd ever been in the arms of a daddy, even a stranger, and it felt good. Mom once asked, "Emily, how come other kids have a daddy and I don't?" But Sarah, instead of answering her daughter's direct question, burst into tears right in front of Emily. She gave her a great fright. From then on, the little girl never touched the subject of her father again. She knew with her childish instinct that this question would hurt her beloved mother. But now that her mother had fallen in love, the girl had a real chance to have a father who will become their support in life and will love them both. At least that's what they showed in all the family movies, and Emily was determined to take that chance by all means. "Emily," the teacher called out, "you're in the clouds again. Tell me the answer to the problem." But Emily stood by her desk, blushing with embarrassment. Her daydreaming had caused her to sit through half of her math class. At recess, Sophie, whom Emily had been friends with since first grade, approached her. "Oh, you're going to get in trouble for getting an F," Sophie sympathized. "Why didn't you solve the problem?" The answer was, "There are 2 diggers left. I just wondered," Emily admitted. "My mom's in love, I found out by accident. So here I am wondering how to get that uncle to hook up with my dad. My mom won't tell him anything, but that she loves him, you know. You're the lucky one. You've had a dad all your life, but I never had one. Mommy cries about it all the time. By the way, our dad wanted to leave us," Sophie blurted out, who apparently couldn't keep the family secret anymore. "I'm going to tell you something now, but you don't tell anyone else. Understand?" And seeing Emily nod, she took her girlfriend aside. "When Mom found out Dad had fallen out of love with us, she cried a lot too. And then she went to this powerful sorceress or fortune teller. So she made Daddy fall back in love with Mommy. He didn't love his aunt at his job. And that was it. Now we're like we used to be. But it's a secret," Sophie blabbed. "You're not my friend anymore." "Wow, how do you find that sorceress?" Emily was trembling with anticipation. "Well, let me get you the address tomorrow," Sophie promised. "Don't you worry, you'll have a daddy." The girls hugged each other and went to class. Now Emily had nothing to stop her from listening to the teacher. She was full of hope and joy. The next day, Sophie brought the address, neatly written down on a piece of paper. For her help, Emily gave her friend her favorite teddy bear, which Sophie had long liked. In short, both parties were satisfied. After school, she went straight to the sorceress, taking with her a picture of her mother and Frederick Ives. The fortune teller lived not far from the school, so Emily made it on foot fairly quickly. The snow swirled, covering the paths, but the girl persevered, wanting to reach her dream. And here showed the green roof of a small, beautiful house, surrounded by an open-work fence. Emily opened the gate, went into a small yard where there were planted miniature fir trees, which created a New Year's atmosphere. Emily paused for a moment and admired the manicured garden. Suddenly the door opened. A young woman in her 30s with beautifully styled hair and discreet makeup, wearing a white sweater, fashionable jeans, and Uggs appeared on the threshold. She looked questioningly at her guest. "Looks more like a snowman than a child," the woman thought. Emily stared at her and couldn't think of anything better to do than crouch down in a curtsy. "Hello, little buddy," smiled the woman, who was amused by the child's antics. "Looking for something here? Are you lost?" "Hello," Emily said. "Hello." "No, I'm not lost. I came here on purpose, looking for a sorceress who can do fortune telling and stuff. Does she live here?" Here the landlady looked confused. "And would you call her, please? I really need her help," asked Emily. "So it's me," the stranger admitted. "And what do you need me for?" "Wait, it's you," Emily wondered. "Are sorceresses like that? They have a hooked nose, wispy hair, and a big wart on their cheek. They're also hunchbacked and old and senile, and you're young for a witch." Hearing the childish reasoning, the woman laughed. She definitely liked this brave little girl. "Apparently you really need help, since you weren't afraid to come to the scary old woman," she smiled. "I hate to break it to you, but the sorceress you're looking for is standing right in front of you. No scary old women in my household. Come on, what's the point of freezing inside?" Emily liked it immediately. Crystal lights, light-colored walls and furniture made the interior airy, and the large flowers in floor pots gave the impression of a beautiful garden. On the sofa lay a large cat, who half-idly watched the entrance. "How beautiful you have it," Emily gasped. "And I thought it would be dark and dirty here. Cobwebs everywhere. A big stove with a huge black cauldron. Yep, maybe there's also a broom in the corner that I fly on," laughed the woman again. "Well, you've been reading a lot of fairy tales. You've read too many fairy tales. What's your name?" "My name is Jessica Smith." "Jessica is a beautiful name. It must be nice to be called that." "And my name is Emily," the guest replied, looking around. "Wow, what a kitty. And I asked my mom for a cat, but she won't let me have one. She says it's not enough to clean because of her, but I'll help and clean the litter box and feed it." She doesn't believe me. While Emily was lamenting the absence of a cat in her life, Jessica Smith brought hot tea, sandwiches, and sweets. "Here, have some. You must be hungry. I don't have children here, but the goodies are available. I like them myself. Oh, thank you, Emily cheered. She was really hungry. While Emily was getting her treats, Jessica Smith got a better look at her. The girl's clothes were rather shabby, indicating the family's lack of money, but the blouse and skirt were neat. It was obvious that Emily's house was kept clean. Unwittingly, Jessica Smith remembered her childhood and therefore felt for this spontaneous little girl who had fallen on her head like a snowball. So, Emily, tell me about it. What are you here for? Are you in some kind of trouble? Jessica Smith asked as her guest finished her tea and patted herself contentedly on her stomach. I haven't had a dad my whole life, Emily began to recount confusingly, causing the sorceress to smile involuntarily. And recently my mom fell in love with my uncle, and he doesn't know about it. You wouldn't think it. My mom is very beautiful, but she has to work as a cleaning lady because they won't take her anywhere else. She used to work in an atelier, making beautiful dresses, but then they closed it down. I like this skirt. Seeing Jessica Smith nod her head, Emily continued her story. And yesterday, a friend told me that her mom has fallen in love with her husband again. So I was wondering if you, the witch, Jessica Smith, make the boss love mom and marry her. And then I'll have a daddy too. Does mommy know you came to see me? Jessica Smith asked, amazed at the little girl's intentions. No, it's a surprise, replied Emily. Can you imagine how great it will be when Uncle Frederick wants to marry her? I want so much to see Mama happy. Will you help me? I don't even know what to tell you, said the landlady thoughtfully. How can I do anything without your mother's permission? Oh, and I need pictures of them. Oh, you don't think I'm just saying that? I'll pay for it. I've got some money. I've been saving my pocket money. Here it is, and Emily pulled out a purse with change. Jessica Smith could not resist such naive persuasion, and she liked this little girl who was old enough to be her granddaughter. I don't need your money. I can give it to you for free, you know. Let's say you've paid for your society. After all, I have a grown-up son, a big uncle, but he's not with me now. And he loved chocolate waffles as much as you did. Come on, let's see the pictures. We're gonna make a daddy for you real quick. Emily pulled out the cherished picture, printed on a plain sheet of paper, and handed it to Jessica Smith. When she took the photo, she was horrified. From the slightly blurred image stared back at her the man who had caused Jessica Smith's son to languish in prison. It was he, Frederick Ives, the traitor's son and thief. Jessica Smith's hands trembled. Emily slowly raised a stunned gaze to the woman who, by the look in her eyes, realized that something bad had happened. A silence hung in the air, which was broken by the shrewd girl. And why are you silent? Do you know him? My girl, said Jessica Smith, I can't tell you much, but I will tell you one thing. That man is evil himself. He's not just bad, he's horrible. And I'm not talking about his looks. I'm talking about his behavior, his actions. You're too young for me to tell you my secret, so don't take offense at me. But I know this man will bring any woman, even your mom, so much grief. It's better to live without a daddy than with a monster in the same house. How can he turn into a monster? Emily gasped. He can, but not for real, like in fairy tales, but in a figurative sense. You know, replied Jessica Smith, he's a scary person on the inside. Yeah, I get it, Emily frowned, mean, nasty, probably like our bully Max, who hurts everyone. Good for you, smiled the woman, laying out the solitaire. You're so small, but you think almost like an adult. Don't worry, your mom will find happiness. The road to it will be hard, so the cards say, but it's gonna be okay. Emily calmed down. I'll wait. You know what? Come visit me anytime, Jessica Smith offered. We'll chat and drink tea with you, okay? I'll do that, Emily said excitedly. It's not far from the school. The hostess gathered her a small bag of treats and walked her all the way to the gate. Emily gave Jessica Smith a hug, and she was surprised. It had been a long time since she had seen her son, and she had grown stale. But this little girl could warm her from the cold and loneliness. Emily left, and Jessica Smith stared after her for a long time. Left alone, she wondered how it was that fate had sent this innocent child to her, so that Jessica could protect the little girl and her mother. Just as Jessica had once failed to save her son, I'll help, Jessica Smith decided. In fact, she wasn't always a sorceress and hadn't practiced card divination before. Little Jessica was taught all these wisdoms by her gypsy grandmother, who saw in the girl a bit of her abilities. Grandmother Laura at one time abandoned the Tabor for a handsome military man, Jessica Smith's grandfather, but her magical abilities remained with her. Who knows, maybe that's why the calm, poised junior lieutenant rose to general. Grandma was feared by officers' wives when she lived in the barracks. They attributed all the troubles to her, from childhood whooping cough to accidents at firing ranges. What can you do? People are weak and used to blame anyone but themselves for their troubles, and the beautiful gypsy woman knew it very well. Here in her adored granddaughter Jessica, Laura from childhood taught to see through people, to scatter cards for divination, and learn the past and the future. And if the girl had tried harder, instead of learning all these wisdoms by rote, she would have become no less powerful seer than her grandmother. Why do I need all this? Jessica laughed as her grandmother made her learn the meaning of the cards. We live in the modern world, not the Middle Ages. This, as you say, nonsense will give you a piece of bread in hard times, Grandma replied seriously, and snapped her fingers in front of her granddaughter's nose. It's not black magic I'm teaching you. It's the simplest thing that every self-respecting gypsy woman should know, but I'm not a gypsy, Jessica argued. My hair is russet. Look, you're a gypsy since you have my blood in your veins. Laura was angry and threatened her granddaughter with her fist so that the earrings around her neck shook. Learn what you're told. It will come in handy for you. What kind of naughty child is growing up? Now, remembering her grandmother over a cup of tea in her cozy home in the middle of a snowy street, Jessica Smith smiled involuntarily. How right you were, my sweet granny, she thought, but somehow she knew, and tears of sadness flowed from her eyes, whether it was because she was sorry for her bygone youth, or because her son was far away from her, or maybe it was both. When he was sent to prison on Frederick Ives' denunciation, Jessica didn't know what to do. Her hands sank with grief and the unbearable thought that her innocent son had been so cruelly punished for the treachery and theft of another man who had gone unpunished. But Frederick himself offered Alexander, Jessica's son, to create a firm where Alexander would be the president of the company, and Frederick his assistant. Business was booming, the money flowed. But one not the best day for his son came to the police, taken away in the middle of the night, accused of non-payment of taxes and laundering huge sums. Alexander was in shock, because the repayment of loans and taxes followed his assistant and comrade Frederick, who, as it later turned out Jessica Smith conducted her own investigation, was involved in a conspiracy against the owner of the company in order to seize it. But the police did not look into it thoroughly. The case, she was told, was closed, and no matter how hard her mother fought hiring lawyers, nothing changed. Frederick was backed by his powerful father, who of course knew all about it. Then Jessica Smith was fired from her job as an economist, arrogantly, on the grounds that she had embezzled from their accounts. Jessica realized who was behind it, and that was the final straw. Nicholas. She remembered her husband. Why did you leave this world so soon? It is hard to bear the blows of fate without you. Our son was taken away, and Jessica sank into depression. She didn't want to go out, didn't want to socialize with anyone. She neglected her household and only lay in bed until Grandma Laura came to her in a dream. Come on, pull yourself together, Laura shouted at her granddaughter. Why are you sagging like a wet rag? You need to be strong. You have a special gift, so use it. Remember what I taught you. Now go and eat. Build up your strength. Happiness must be fought for. Jessica Smith woke up from her sleep and was surprised to find herself sitting in the kitchen eating homemade sausage without bread. And there was nothing tastier than that homemade sausage. That's when Jessica decided to become a sorceress and fortune teller. As soon as she placed one ad, people came in droves. People wanted to know about their future. From then on, Jessica Smith's business was booming. She was earning many times more than in her previous job and could send good packages to her son in prison. She worried about Emily's fate. What if Frederick was up to some scam again and extreme the girl's mom? Jessica Smith had learned the nature of the scoundrel. He rubbed himself into a man's confidence and then put him in his place. You can do anything with a woman in love. She won't even notice because she'll be thinking with her heart, not her mind. So Jessica Smith made up her mind. She had to expose the crook so that his dirty deeds would be found out by his own employees, and they would no longer trust him. She put on her best outfits and visited the best hair and makeup artist, then went to the office where Frederick and Emily's mom worked. "May I see Frederick Ives?" Jessica Smith asked sternly to the guard on duty. The guard had no problem letting the elegant woman into the supervisor's office, mistaking her for a relative or business associate. Frederick sat with his feet on the desk, watching a soccer game. "Hello, Frederick," she said, entering without knocking and purposely leaving the door open for others to hear. "And I see you're in your repertoire, taking a vacation while others work and are responsible for your progress." Oh, Frederick's eyes bulged as he saw the one he dreaded more than any other person in the world. "Good afternoon. What do you want? What can I do for you?"
"Let's see how you can help, dear Frederick," exclaimed the unhappy mother. "I want my son to get out of the prison into which he was put in your place. That is one thing. And you can help me by appearing before justice and taking his place. That's 2. And 3, you give the company to the rightful owner, Alexander Sokolovsky. My son."
"Security. Detain Jessica Smith security. Take that woman out and never let her in here again," Frederick shouted. "Scream, scream, Frederick. Just know this. I've cursed you now. There will be no happiness for you." From this very moment, Jessica Smith shouted out, "By the way, I am a hereditary sorceress. Didn't you know that? You shouldn't have taken a swing at my family. I'm not afraid of any witches. It's all the nonsense of a crazy old woman," Frederick exclaimed. He discreetly spat over his left shoulder. When the guards came running in the person of an elderly officer on duty, they were afraid to hurt the witch for fear of a curse. But they didn't have to kick the woman out. Jessica Smith felt sick. Her heart couldn't take the strain, and she collapsed right into the guard's arms. "Get her out of here," Frederick shouted. "Where am I going to put her away?" "It's not trash. It's a human being," shouted the guard. "We should call an ambulance. Help, call an ambulance." But everyone stood and just stared at what was happening, afraid to move under the fierce gaze of the supervisor. Jessica Smith collapsed, collapsing on top of a guard who barely had time to pick her up. No one volunteered to help, and the hapless duty officer didn't know what to do. "Hello, ambulance," someone did call on the phone. "Come urgently. A woman here is not well. It must be her heart." Sarah ran into the office. Rushing over to the emotionless Jessica Smith, she unbuttoned her jacket and the collar of her blouse to make it easier to breathe. "There's a doctor coming now. Water. Give me water," the woman shouted. Someone handed over a carafe. Sarah scooped up a handful of cold water and splashed the injured woman's face and neck. "What's wrong with me? Where am I?" Jessica Smith woke up. "Who are you?" "I'm Sarah the cleaner," replied, and breathed a sigh of relief. "I clean the floors here." "What are you getting so excited about? You need to take care of yourself. Stay with me," Jessica Smith asked and looked at Sarah gratefully when she saw her nod her head in the affirmative. That's how they sat holding hands until the doctors arrived. "If you don't leave now, consider yourself fired, and you may not come back," Frederick Ives told Sarah through gritted teeth. "But that woman needs help, doesn't she? You can't just leave her." Just like that, Sarah wondered, not believing her ears. She had no idea about this dark side of her boss, so Sarah walked off to the ambulance. The stranger had caught her eye with something. Maybe it was the look of immeasurable grief in her eyes. Or maybe it was that she didn't want to be among those indifferent people who watched in silence as she felt sick. Jessica Smith was placed in a ward, and Sarah brought her own things from home: pajamas, slippers, and a robe. The rest of her personal supplies she bought on the way to the hospital. "What a thoughtful daughter," said her roommates. "She organized everything quickly." "That's not my daughter. I just met her today," Jessica replied, much to her roommate's surprise. But she herself was very pleased to be in Sarah's care. Jessica Smith realized that Sarah was Emily's mother. "Now I see who the little girl is, so smart," and she thought, and smiled. "Why did you show up?" Frederick Ives menacingly asked Sarah when she had just started cleaning the room. "You're fired." Get out. The staff stopped work and watched in fear at the picture of the janitor's humiliation. No one stood up for her, afraid of losing their place in a company more like hard labor. "You're firing me for saving a man?" Sarah asked. "What about you? If you got sick and everyone was standing there just goggle-eyed, how can you be so soulless?" Switched to shouting, Sarah realized she had nothing more to lose. "Fired without severance pay," shrieked Frederick Ives, unaccustomed to being rebuffed by his subordinates. "What a defender of the poor! Fuck you and choke on your pennies," Sarah shouted and poured the dirty water from the bucket right on the boss's expensive shoes. She picked up her bag and threw her lab coat at the feet of the gawkers, who were delighted by what they saw, but carefully tried to hide it under the masks of condemnation of the rebellious cleaner. Everyone quietly hated their boss, but were afraid to say so. It wasn't until she was outside that Sarah was able to breathe freely. Now she knew where to go. "Hello, convalescents," Sarah said cheerfully as she entered Jessica Smith's room. "How are you doing?" The sick women began to talk excitedly about their problems. Many had never been visited. Sarah wrote down their wishes in a notebook, promising to buy the little things they asked for. "Hello, my savior," Jessica smiled. "Why are you here in the middle of the workday?" "Got fired," the woman informed her. "Fired how?" Jessica Smith exclaimed. "And for what?" "Frederick Ives scandalized me for helping you," replied Sarah. "I told you he was a bad man," Jessica exclaimed heartily. She immediately stopped talking, realizing she had spoken out of turn. "And how do you know my daughter, and how is she related to my boss?" Sarah wanted an explanation. There was nothing to do. Jessica Smith had to come clean and tell everything about Frederick Ives, her son, and Sarah herself. "Now you know everything," Jessica sighed. "I didn't think you and I would meet like this." Emily wanted to introduce us herself. "She and I are friends. She comes to visit me after school. We do homework, drink tea, and talk about stuff." "So that's the grandmother she goes to?" Sarah laughed. "I thought she was visiting a friend. They have a grandmother there too." "Thank you. My daughter is so much calmer and happier. I didn't even know she was looking for a fiancé. Her father left me when I was pregnant, and then he died in a drunken brawl." "I can't say that." "And you come see me after you're discharged," Jessica Smith suggested. "We'll stick together, help each other out." Speaking of help, some well-to-do acquaintances of mine need a maid. They pay well. Maybe you'd like to go. "Sure. That would be nice," Sarah said excitedly. "Then call this number." Jessica Smith wrote the numbers on a piece of notepaper. "Tell them it's from me. Also take the keys to the house. I have a cat there. Oh, and Emily likes to play with it after school. Anyway, don't be shy." And Sarah left satisfied that she had such an acquaintance, and soon she had a job. Sarah began to put the house in order, and suddenly she came across Alexander's letter, where the mother tells him about the girl Emily, that she visits her after school. After a little thought, Sarah decided to end it by saying that Jessica Smith was now in the hospital. Sarah, Emily's mother, is looking after her. She sealed the letter and took it to the post office and sent it by registered mail so that it would reach the colony. Then she remembered the telephone number Jessica Smith had given her. She was welcome on the other end of the line and made an appointment for tomorrow in a wealthy part of town. When Sarah arrived at the address, she was amazed at the beauty of the building. The only thing that frightened her was the kind of people who lived there. The only rich man she met turned out to be a thief and a hypocrite. Therefore, stepping on the threshold of the house, Sarah inwardly prepared for the boorishness of the owners. But this did not happen. "Hello," a pretty woman walked towards her. "You've come at last. I can't cope with the household anymore. The thing is, we recently moved here, and the house is too big for me to clean by myself, and I have twin 1-year-old sons I can't eat, let alone scrub the floors. Make yourself at home. At your disposal, everything you see. Any appliances, household chemicals, products. Don't be shy. Meals are on us. The fridge is full. If you will also prepare dinner for your husband's arrival, I'd be very grateful. And I'll pay, of course," Sarah said with a sigh of relief. "And what is the fee for the month?" When Sarah found out how much they were going to pay for household help as well, She was delighted. The amount was noticeably more than she was getting from Frederick. Thus began a new page in her life, and soon Jessica Smith was discharged from the hospital, and the house was ready for her arrival. Alex wrote a letter back to Sarah, where he was glad that such a kind woman was looking after his mother. After the first paycheck, her mother was able to buy Emily a dress and shoes, which she had been dreaming of for a long time. The girl's joy was unbounded. "Look what my mom bought me a dress." Flew into the room happy Emily and spun around in front of Jessica Smith. "Oh, it's so pretty." The latter splashed her hands. "You look like a princess in it." "Only there's something missing," and Jessica pulled a small pearl necklace out of the jewelry box. "Take it as a memento of me," she said quietly. "I never had a granddaughter, but you have. Wear it. Remember me, little girl, and lest you doubt that I gave you such a dear thing, I'll sign a card for you. It's New Year's Eve in 2 weeks, and this will be my present." A couple minutes later, Emily was showing off in a gorgeous pearl necklace with the cherished card in her hand. It seemed to her that all this splendor, the dress, the grandmother, the jewelry was not happening to her right now, but on the other side of town. Sarah, who was valued and respected at work, was happy. The young landlady was as hands-off without her, and the owner marveled at the home-cooked meals Sarah was preparing. Refusing to pay extra for cooking, she believed that she was already generously paid, and therefore did not want anything. Besides, Sarah had peace of mind about her daughter, who was under the sensitive care of Jessica Smith. One day, Sarah received a phone call. "Good evening," a pleasant male voice said into the receiver. "Is this Sarah?" "Yes, who is it?" she replied, slightly surprised. "My name is Alex. You wrote to me, remember?" he asked. "Hello, Alex, I completely forgot I gave you my number. Is something wrong?" "No, don't worry," he replied. "I had time for a call, so I thought I'd take advantage of the moment. I already called my mom. She and Emily are doing fine." "How are you doing? After your former assistant Frederick kicked me out of my job, your mom helped me out a lot. Turns out there are some good rich people out there. They're very fond of me, and they pay me well. When I get out of jail, which will be pretty soon, I'll pay you back for the good," Alex said after a little silence. "What you're doing for my mom is priceless to me. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon and maybe become friends." The call cut off. Apparently, the prisoner's talking time was strictly limited. Sarah felt sorry for Alex. After all, he had suffered for nothing. She sighed and set about preparing dinner for the hosts and some important guests they had mentioned this time. Sarah decided to impress everyone with goose and apples. An appetizing aroma wafted throughout the house. When the host appeared on the doorstep with his future business partner, a painfully familiar voice sounded. "What a smell," I'm salivating. "What kind of sorceress is working in your kitchen?" "That's our assistant. She really has golden hands," boasted the owner. "My wife can't get enough of it." And then Sarah realized who the guest was. The porcelain cup fell out of her hand and shattered. "What happened?" Tess, the hostess, asked. "You didn't hurt yourself." Men came into the dining room. One of them blushed thickly when he saw Sarah. It was Frederick Ives. "Is this where you decided to confront me with this scoundrel?" she exclaimed. "I don't understand you," marveled the landlord. "What kind of reaction is that? Sarah is my wife's assistant. The whole house is on her, and you have something against that." "Yes," Sarah said. "That man is against all decent people. He kicked me out of my job just because I called a doctor for an elderly woman who wasn't feeling well." The homeowners stood frozen, horrified as they watched their guest attack the innocent housekeeper. However, they did not stop attacking, apparently fearing to offend an important business partner on whom their welfare depended. But they didn't want to lose such a good employee either. Sarah understood that. "You disobeyed me," Frederick yelled. "You meddled in the wrong business. Throw her out now." "All you can do is kick her out," Sarah grinned. "Don't bother. I'll leave on my own." "And don't yell, you idiot. You're scaring the kids. Thanks to this house, I'll go to the other one." And she walked resolutely out of the kitchen. The landlady ran after her, apologizing for not being able to keep Sarah working here. She had paid a generous retreat, enough for her and her children to live comfortably for several months. The whole unpleasant story had knocked Sarah out of her mind. Angry tears poured down her cheeks and froze in the cold. How lucky she was to have such a friend and advocate as Jessica Smith. She calmed down, remembering her, and picked up her pace. The entrance to Jessica Smith's house was visible in the snow, and to open the doors, Sarah had to get a shovel from the shed and shovel the path and porch. That's odd, she thought. Jessica Smith hadn't left the house since yesterday. That didn't sound like her. The house was dark and stuffy, so after opening the curtains and letting the rays of morning light into the room, Sarah made her way to the older woman's bedroom. "Jessica Smith, are you home?" Sarah asked, but no one answered. She was beginning to worry, but where could an avid homebody go? Sarah walked into the bedroom and saw something that made her heart clench with unbearable pain. A scream ripped from her chest. A shiver ran through her body as if she had been electrocuted. Jessica Smith lay in bed with her eyes open. She was dead. In her hand was a crumpled piece of paper. "Jessica Smith! How could it be?" Sarah screamed, and tears hailed from her eyes. Grief was choking her, gripping her throat. "How could it be, my good girl? Everything was fine. What can we do? What about Alex, your son, who was supposed to be back soon, and Emily loves you so much?" Sarah sobbed over the body of a woman she didn't recognize as her mother. An ambulance was called to transport the deceased to the morgue, and Sarah stayed at Jessica Smith's house. She looked around. Everything was just as it had been when the landlady was alive. Suddenly, a piece of paper lying on the bed caught her attention. Sarah picked it up and with a sinking heart began to read. Terror seized her. The letter was from the colony. It said that Alex had been crushed by a log while logging and had died. "So that's what caused it," Sarah exclaimed. Alex had died, and Jessica Smith, upon learning of her son's death, couldn't handle the grief. She cleaned up and went to prepare dinner for Emily, who was about to arrive. Sarah's cooking was automatic, subconsciously wanting to breathe life into this house. It was what Jessica Smith would have wanted, and she had decided to stay here until the heirs were found. It was too miserable to let go of the beautiful winter garden that the owner had grown with so much love, and the cat needed care. It was as if he sensed the trouble in the air, and was always near Sarah, as if looking to her for support. "I'm here." Emily stood on the doorstep, shaking off her snowcap. "Oh, Mom, what are you doing here?" Not at work. Sarah didn't know how to tell her daughter that her Aunt Jessica was gone. She stood there sobbing silently. Emily suddenly ran into the living room and then, smelling food in the kitchen, asked bluntly, "What? Is she in the hospital?" And seeing her mom waggle her head negatively through her tears, she asked, "Is she dead?" The baby's sorrowful crying filled the house. The little girl had faced heavy grief too soon. Her mother hugged her and quietly reassured her. "That's life. Emily, everyone has their time." Jessica Smith would have been happy if she had known that those who loved her were grieving for her. She didn't die alone. She had us when she had calmed down a little. Her mother suggested that she stay at Jessica Smith's house. The girl accepted. About Alex's death to her daughter, she did not say anything, fearing for the fragile psyche of the child. It was good that Emily always had a cat by her side to comfort her. Turning around, the prison doctor said to Alex, "Lucky you, Smith, the log hit you tangentially. Your namesake wasn't so lucky, he took his breath away, yay." "Lucky," Alex said. "My arm still hurts." "That's why I'm here." The doctor scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. "That call came from someone named Sarah. She's demanding to release your body for burial." "What?" Alex wondered. "You'll have to excuse me." But our secretary got it all mixed up and buried another Alex instead of one Alex, sending the funeral to the wrong family, said the doctor. My mother will go crazy with grief, Alex shouted. Call and cancel this circus. That was the point. Alex was called. The doctor fell silent. Your mother passed away yesterday. I'm sorry to hear that. What do you mean? Alex staggered back. The realization that in an instant he had become an orphan hamstrung his legs, taking away all his strength. His head spun with the horrible news. He never said another word. And in the evening he escaped from the infirmary, hiding in a box of dirty linen, which was taken to the laundry by the prison machine. Once free, escaped convict Alex Sokolovsky got some clothes and traveled back to his hometown. He wanted to make it to his mother's funeral. Jessica Smith's burial was modest. There were few people at the funeral itself, including Sarah, who had organized everything out of the money her landlady had given her. Sarah stood silently by the fresh grave and wept. She felt sorry for Aunt Jessica, who had done so much for her. When everyone had gone, Emily placed a small snowman on the mound of earth, like the one she kept in the freezer at home. She'll have more fun that way, Emily explained. Mom, Aunt Jessica will know we love her. Sarah didn't argue. By this time, Alex was on his way into town. He avoided crowded places because he knew very well that he was immediately wanted. Alex didn't feel any cold. He was burning with unbearable pain for his mother, whom he was not allowed to say goodbye to. The burning hatred for the one who had put him in prison gave him strength. Alex walked from the outskirts of the city to his home, hiding from patrol cars in dark back alleys and yards. And finally he saw a nice garden with a low fence and a house, so dear beloved, where his mother was no longer there. This thought burned him like a red-hot iron. Only now, seeing his childhood home, he fully realized what grief had befallen him. Tears streamed down his face. Mom, no one will ever ask again. Alex, son, how are you doing? Are you hungry? The light was on in the house. Alex didn't dare go in. He was afraid it was an ambush. He would be arrested and returned to prison. However, he was tormented by the unknown. He didn't know when and where Jessica Smith would be buried, so he decided to wait. An hour later, a girl of about 9 years old came out of the house. Alex was surprised. He had never seen this child near her mother. Trying to get a better look at the little guest, he reached out and pushed aside a branch. The snow from his hat fell directly on his head and over his scruff. The cold burned the skin on the back of his neck. Alex let out a little gasp, and it was enough to reach the child's keen hearing. She turned in the direction of the noise and spotted a man behind a tree, who froze fearfully in anticipation. Uncle, who are you? Emily, to Alex's surprise, wasn't scared at all. On the contrary, stepped towards him. My name is Alex. I used to live in this house, he whispered. So you're Uncle Alex, Emily smiled. So you're Aunt Jessica's son. And I'm Emily. Alex was surprised at the unfamiliar little girl's awareness. And how do you know my mom? He asked. I used to visit her, and then my mom started being friends with her. When the girl mentioned death, he stammered, and his lips quivered. Mom and I stayed here to take care of the house and the cats until the new owners came, and here you've come. Let's go home. Kids, that simple question hit Alex like a shoe on the head. It had been so long since anyone had called him to eat or called him Alex. No, I can't. I have to get to my mom's funeral on time, he said. Oh, the girl said, we buried her yesterday. Alex was hit with a suffocating wave of regret for not having time to say goodbye to his mother. Falling to his knees, he covered his face with his hands and sobbed. Emily ran up to him and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. Don't cry. Aunt Jessica didn't like crying. Emily was cheerful and stroking his head, added, go to the cemetery. You'll recognize her grave at once. Mom decorated it with a big bouquet of red roses. And there's my snowman, just like this one. and she pointed to a big snowman with a carrot instead of a nose. We made it together. Alex looked at the snowman. He used to make those with his mom, too. Anger at the culprit of all this trouble boiled up in his chest. "Thank you, Emily," he said. "You've been a great help to me. Yes, I'll visit my mom's grave and whoever is responsible. I promise he'll be in a lot of trouble. He'll answer for everything." Having hugged Emily goodbye, Alex took confident steps in not hiding much anymore and went to Frederick's office in New York, the very office that knew Zerfai, the very office that had been so unfairly taken from him. No, he wasn't sorry for the stolen company or his millionaire status. He was infinitely sorry for the lost years he had spent away from his mother, who had died of grief. And he should have been buried so soon, Emily said businesslike, taking off her boots. Uncle Alex got upset and went to deal with the uncle who's to blame for everything. He's definitely going to be in trouble. Who got upset? Sarah's hands shook with shock. Uncle Alex, Emily explained calmly. First he got scared when he saw me, then he cried, and then for some reason he got really angry and went off somewhere. Look at this picture. Sarah showed a framed picture of Alex, taking it from the mantel. Is that him? Yes, Emily said, only he's younger here. So he's not dead, Sarah exclaimed. So Jessica Smith got the wrong information. My goodness, I think I know what he's up to. We've got to warn Frederick. Sarah didn't really care about Frederick and his safety. She felt sorry for Alex, who could have gotten himself into trouble and gone to jail for more time. So this was a mistake she had to correct for the sake of Jessica Smith's memory. Frederick Ives, she shouted into the phone. It's Sarah. You again, he replied grudgingly. What do you want? He's coming. Alex is coming to see you. How? Yelled Frederick fearfully. Did they let him out? Without answering, Sarah was already running to her former office to prevent tragedy. There was no telling what Alex was prepared to do in his state of shock. But she wasn't in time. Alex was already in the lobby, where the staff looked at him, dressed in an old jacket and jeans, with bewilderment. The guard was new and didn't know the firm's former director, and so Alex wasn't let through. Who are you here to see? The older security guard asked. I need to see Frederick Ives, but on a personal matter, Alex replied discreetly. Making a sign to wait, the guard called his superior. Frederick Ives, you have a visitor, said it's a personal matter. When Frederick realized who had come to see him, he panicked. He opened the safe and began frantically going through documents. He pulled out a thick folder, opened it, and began flipping through the papers as if they were where his salvation lay. At that minute, Frederick heard the elevator on his floor open. Then, frightened that it was coming for him, he rushed out of his office and into the security room, forgetting to lock the safe and put away the secret folder. On the way, he almost ran into Sarah, who stepped out of the elevator and headed for the receptionist's office. She entered the office and, assessing the mess, realized Frederick had chickened out and escaped, which meant Alex was already here. They'd just missed each other. A bright yellow folder labeled for official use caught Sarah's eye. She opened it and realized from the first lines that it was evidence against Frederick. It contained all the documents proving the machinations of the criminal scheme Ives had used to take the company away from Alex and put him on trial. Carefully photographing each sheet on her phone, she tucked the valuable gadget into the inside pocket of her jacket. After all, it could save Alex from jail. Now it was just a matter of finding him. The perpetrator of the commotion did not wait for the police to arrive, but walked out of the office with a quick step, trying not to attract the attention of visitors. Now he wanted to go to his mother's grave. The way to the cemetery lay across a small lake, but no sooner had he crossed the bridge than he heard desperate sounds and screaming. A boy was choking and screaming. He had fallen through the ice and was drowning. There was no time to think. Hey kid, shouted Alex on the run. "I'm coming. You hear me. Hang on." Unwinding the scarf, he held it out to the boy and cautiously crawled to the edge of the ice hole. The boy grabbed the end of the scarf, carefully pulling him toward him. Alex tugged the boy out of the hole with a jerk. "Thank you," the boy whispered through gritted teeth. "You got it," Alex smiled. He was glad he'd saved the man's life. Then it hadn't all been for nothing. "Let me wrap you up in my jacket. Are you from the village?" The boy nodded. Alex ran that way, and a police car with a siren was already chasing him. He stopped. The child's life was more precious than his own freedom. The policeman got out of the car and, correctly assessing the situation, put Alex, who was holding the boy to himself to keep him warm, in the cabin, and then rushed to the village straight after the paramedic. For the courage shown during the rescue of the child, as well as taking into account the special reasons that prompted the escape, it is decided to pardon Alex Sokolovsky and not to punish him for escaping from the colony, read the warden. The court ruling. "Well, Alex, you're our hero. You're still lucky. What a beautiful woman came to see you today. You can go on your date. You have 2 hours." Intrigued, Alex walked out of the boss's office and headed for the dating room. There he saw Sarah. "I'm sorry, but I don't know you." "There must be some kind of mistake," Alex said. "But I know an absentia from your mom and my daughter, so we know each other." "I've texted you," she smiled. "So you are the Sarah," Alex rejoiced. "Thank you for coming." Sarah could see that Alex was easy to talk to, a nice person just like his mother. When she showed the photo of the documents, she realized she had done the right thing. Alex was just shaking with joy. "What a smart girl you are. Please, let's hire a lawyer. The money is lying around the house. They're hidden in the cat's jar. You'll see everything will be fine." "So how are you living?" "I wish Jessica Smith had lived to see this day," Sarah lamented. "Also, I almost threw that old Ken away yesterday. The cat wouldn't let me because he's smart," Alex laughed. "How's Emily doing? Here sent you all her candy. Said you ran away hungry. I brought you some cutlets and pies. Eat up, and you're so thin." Alex was pleased with such care. His heart slowly began to thaw, freeing itself from evil. That's what happens when a person has hope. The lawyer got his case reconsidered, presenting new evidence of his client's innocence. The court took into account all the arguments and restored Alex in the rights of the president of the company, also obliging Frederick, New York, to pay all lost profits, as well as moral damage in the form of compensation for the lost years of life in prison and mental suffering. Frederick himself went to the colony on a full program. When the prison gates closed behind Alex's back, he felt the warm May breeze. It was the wind of freedom. Alex turned around and saw Sarah, who was holding Emily's hand. The girl was wearing a simple dress, and her mother's family necklace adorned her thin neck. He realized this was his mother letting him know that they were family now. Emily snatched her hand out of her mother's grasp and ran to Alex, squatting down. Alex pulled her against him, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. "You wouldn't happen to be my daddy, would you?" she whispered in his ear. "I've been waiting for you so long."
"If you want me to be, I will be," Alex replied.
He took her in his arms and walked towards Sarah. "My daughter and I have decided to become a family here." "Seriously," Alex said. "Are you okay with us?" Sarah smiled. "Of course I'm in." Sarah returned to her former office already as manager and wife of the head of the company. The honest employees were delighted with the change in leadership, and those who had stood idly by and indulged when Frederick bullied Sarah and Alex's mother were immediately fired. The company was set on a course of growth and prosperity, led by an experienced executive. Jessica was given a beautiful monument in the form of an angel made of white marble. Next to a vase full of fresh flowers stood a small homemade snowman that Emily had made. The girl was still grieving for her favorite aunt. Together with Alex, they often visited the grave. When Alex and Emily were returning home, the father asked his daughter, "What if you get a baby sister? How do you look at that?" "I'm looking good," clapped Emily's hands together. "I even know what we're going to name her." "And what's that?" "Jessica. It's such a flower.